Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Oh no, my mouth's not working. Or at least it's barely working. Why isn't it barely working? It was just, that's weird. It was just working a second ago. My mouth. Maybe. Oh no. I'm gonna have to change some of these, settings. Or maybe I need to calibrate it. Yeah, you can catch a stream. Too bad it's like a little bit scuffed since my mouth is not working. It was working a second ago. So weird. I guess I'm not opening my mouth enough when I talk. Oh boy. Ah. Well, it still doesn't work even if I take the wings off. One second. We're gonna hit the be right back screen. Okay, sorry about that. I was working on using VBridger because I like the movements better, but it doesn't like catch my mouth movements as well. So we might have to like try again another time for VBridger. I like the eye movements and stuff, and I think the I think I like the eyes and stuff, but it just doesn't work. But anyway, today is reading ASMR night. A little bit of extra stream while I'm still on, you know, winter break. Of course, you know, this one, switching over doesn't make my mouth move a whole lot, but it certainly does look a little bit better. And I'm also using lip sync now, so that also helps a lot for the mouth movements anyway. But today we're gonna read. Jesus Christ, it's gonna be hard if I can't talk today. It's what happens when things don't work. You get flustered, am I right? But anyway, today we're gonna read A Kiss of Light and Flame by Mr. Brogath. I know it says that there is a second name on there, but they are one and the same. He just wrote this under M.A. Owens before he decided to consolidate all of his writing. So, okay, you go quickly. How's it going, Sean John? What did you play? It's been a while since we've talked. Hello, yes, hello. What I'll end up doing is I'll read a chapter, and then I'll probably catch up on chat, unless I get like a raid or something. It's old Sean John. Destiny 2? Were you successful in Destiny 2? How did it go? How did your stream go? Did you win bunches of things? But yeah, I'll probably read a chapter and then catch up with chat. But these chapters aren't too long. I plan to read the entire book today. Maybe. Maybe we'll have to carry this over to Saturday, but either way. But we'll read at least until 10, I think. I'll probably have to take a break here in like a little hour. For like 10 minutes or so. I do read fast. Me and my fire team were successful in securing dragon eggs and bringing them back to their mother. Hooray! Dragons! Entire book, if you read at a pretty average slow pace, will put you about 3.5, 4 hours. Okay, well that works for me then. That should be. Probably. I'll probably read it in 3.5. I can't read that slow. I can read pretty slow. Breaks will extend that, obviously. Yeah, I just plan to take like one little 10-minute break. So we'll probably end up going to about 11 or so. But we're going to try to read the whole book. And then maybe at the end of January or something we'll do, or the beginning of February. You know, this would be a good Valentine's Day thing, is to read the second book. Am I right? But yeah. Saturday we'll be back at 4 p.m. EST. I don't even know what I'm going to play Saturday. I really need to finish Gal Guardians, honestly. And so we might do that on Saturday, and like a little bit of Honkai Star Rail, do the dailies, see if we can get Rune May. I keep forgetting how to pronounce her name. I think it's like Ron May. Like ramen, but Ron May. Yeah, I think that's actually how you pronounce it. Okay, thanks for lurking and thanks for the raid. Thank you so much. Good night. And then Sunday, of course, will be Art of Belinda Sunday. I haven't decided what. I think we might do Pichu. Pichu is another really famous Chinese creature. It is a son, one of the many sons of the dragon. And of course, Year of the Dragon is coming up. So, and then the following 3 weeks will be all of our dragons. I think I picked 3 out of the 4 major dragons to do. Maybe I should just do all the dragons for the coloring book. I don't know. Food acquired. Good. All right. Make sure you can hear my campfire songs. My campfire pretty good. It gets a little bit loud sometimes. I can't hear it though. Does the campfire sound good on your all's end? Okay, bump it up. The only problem is, like, sometimes it gets, like, super loud there. But, that's okay. It's not like I'm very soft-spoken or anything either. Alright, does this sound better, though? Okay. So, Kiss of Light and Flame. If you want to check out the book pages, they are pinned in that pinned comment up above. There is the book cover to my left. Yes, left. So you guys can check all that out. And I will catch up with chat like every chapter or so. Unless there's a raid. Because then, you know, my sound plays and then I can't read anyway. Alright. A Kiss of Light and Flame. Chapter 1. Ayla sat fiddling with a blue ribbon tied neatly into her blonde hair and found her mind drifting to food again. She was still hungry from dinner the night before, but the demands of her father that she follow a strict eating schedule left her with little choice to rectify the situation. Just ignore my problems with reading words sometimes. Not that anyone ever took her protest seriously. She had to be beautiful and healthy, after all. The expectation was that she'd someday soon give birth to many Ellenberg daughters, with at least one being born with her gift of holy healing magic. The Holy Maiden, symbol of her people, proof of the Church's divine right to rule Artharis, City of Roses. She gave her people confidence that the evil witches were gone for good, never to terrorize them ever again. This was the only function she served that she felt pride in. The opportunity to make her people happy and make them feel safe. If there was one purpose of the Holy Maiden Ayla would remember willingly, it was that. The rest, all fancy clothes, fancy dinners, fancy balls, all amounted to a fancy cage she could never stray from. Ayla, a muffled voice called. Her father had given her the same speech again. You must find a husband soon, he'd said. She didn't want to. Not only was she not ready for romance of any kind, but she could never bring herself to care even for her childhood friend Ellis as anything other than just that, a friend. Surely, if she could fall head over heels for any man, it would be him. He was handsome, virtuous, loyal, and gave up everything in order to be by her side. She loved him very much, but as she would a brother. Not that her father would have approved of Ellis anyway. His families were poor commoners, and he had only had a position as her bodyguard because she'd begged for it, and because his skills was exceptional among all the applicants. Ayla, the voice called again, louder this time. Huh? Oh, sorry, Ellis. I guess I was daydreaming again. I was supposed to be checking my sword. Ellis looked all around them, reaching into his jacket and pulling out a small piece of cheesy bread. Not the fancy food her father would approve of, but one of her favorites, only found in the city's gate market. My hero, she said, stuffing her face as quickly as she could before anyone could notice. I get the same way when I haven't eaten in a while. I've tried to convince your father that you need more food in your diet now that you're training, but... Oh, I know, Ellis. Let's please not talk about my father. Sorry, he said. Can we talk about swordsmanship now, at least? I'd rather not get in trouble with... He started, correcting himself mid-sentence. In trouble again. You're assigned to me. Of course you're always in trouble. I just wish I could leave the inner city. Go for a walk. Something, she said, playing with the ribbon in her hair again. Seeing her like this always made Ellis feel terrible. He wished that there was some way he could help her escape the golden cage the Holy Maiden is expected to live in. But since he couldn't free her from it, at least he wanted to be by her side to lighten her burden. As for his true feelings, revealing them would only complicate things, especially since she never seemed to show any interest in him beyond his friendship. Even if that's all it could be, he was content. He reached down and grabbed his shirt with both hands, giving it a hard tug, sending a rip several inches up the side. Unbelievable! Of all the luck! Can you believe this, Ayla? My favorite shirt! He said, shaking his head. Her eyes shot up to his shirt, then her jaw dropped. What? Are you okay, Alice? Well, I was okay. Now, I don't know. I'm feeling a bit let down by the unforeseen turn of events. It's completely impossible to predict. Random occurrences left my favorite shirt damaged like this, he said, his eyes glimmering as he waited for her to catch on. Oh my, you're right. Isn't that seamstress you visit in the gate market? I know we need the train, but there's a slight chill in the air today, and I'm afraid you'll catch cold with that gaping hole in your shirt. It simply won't do. I'm afraid that despite my reservations, we simply must visit that seamstress right away. You'll have to change into a fresh shirt temporarily. I'm sure you could go alone, but then you'd have to leave me here unattended. I just don't feel safe unless you're by my side. He shrugged his shoulders. Well, what are we to do then? Such ill fortune has befallen us, but we'll persevere. You should change, too, into something a little less Islandberg. I'm afraid I don't own such an outfit, Ellis, she said, sighing. Can you borrow one of your maid's dresses? I'm sure any of them would be happy to loan you one. You mean they'd be punished if they refused? She asked, the sadness already returning to her voice. He shooed her away. Go on then, quickly. I can feel myself catching cold as we speak. A short while later, they reunited with freshly changed outfits. Naturally, Ellis had been waiting for quite a while, but never thought to complain. It gave him enough time to prepare their two-seat cart in advance. Satisfied no one could easily identify her, Ellis nodded with a smile. Let's go. Naturally, we can't stay long, he said, leading her to the cart and helping her to the passenger seat. He gave the reins a gentle flip, and they were off. As they approached the gate of the inner city, Ellis gave the guard a simple wink and a smile, which it turns out was enough for them to arrive at an understanding. He opened the gate without incident. Beyond the gate may as well have been another world to Ayla, since she could so rarely venture out. Even now, her father would be furious, and likely Ellis and she would both face punishment. As usual, Ellis would receive the brunt of it. Like usual, she'd be given special treatment. As far as the prisoner goes, anyway. Ellis ran his hand through his hair, smiling as he watched her in awe of such a simple thing. Most people in the outer city saw the inner city as some kind of fairy tale and would kill to see it. Some had done just that. In fact, Ellis probably couldn't have chosen a worse time for this little mischievous adventure. Violent crime was on the rise in the city, with citizens growing more and more unhappy with the paranoid, knee-jerk policies of the bishop and his advisors. You'd never guess the man was Ayla's father. Now, a vicious rebel group was being led by a man who was only known as Red Bear. Red Bear was becoming somewhat of a folk hero among the commoners, much to Bishop Barthow's furious indignation. He didn't make effort to be loved. He didn't ask to be loved. He demanded it, and the penalty for defying this demand was harsh. Even though the witches were long extinct, women were gathered up regularly and burned any time almost an odd event occurred in their presence. Even the most obvious coincidence was treated with brutal suspicion. Just the week before, a servant passed by a guard who suffered a heart attack and died. He was old and didn't take good care of himself. A heart attack was completely within reason, but the woman was arrested and burned all the same. He was there and had seen it. Her screams haunted him, and even though he wanted with all his heart to be loyal to his masters, a visceral disgust coursed through him all the way into his nightmares. He knew that woman hadn't deserved to die. The common people knew it too, even though they were afraid to say, and the resentment was growing every day. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all, he thought. As they passed into the market, a girl crossed part way across the road just ahead of them, making her way to the stalls on the other side. a peasant girl with a worn, simple brown dress and fiery red hair that stood out, even from this distance. Without warning, a wheel fell from her cart, sending her toppling along into the mud. A chorus of laughter echoed as Ella steered the horse to go around. Normally, he would stop and help. Today, however, he was with the Holy Maiden. He couldn't risk stopping and drawing any unnecessary attention. Or, so he thought. "Stop!" Ayla shouted, elbowing Ellis after he seemed to hesitate. She jumped from their cart, splashing mud all up her dress and nearly sinking into above her shoes. "Are you?" she asked, tripping but catching herself before falling completely. "Are you okay? Here, let me help," she said, reaching down and clutching the young woman's hand. That was the end of... Oh, no. The girl looked up at her with emerald green eyes that made Ayla fear for a moment her heart had stopped, or she'd forgotten how to breathe. Her red hair was half obscuring her face, revealing only her left eye and a large scar on her upper left cheek. "I don't," the girl started, but found herself in the same predicament when she looked into Ayla's sapphire blue eyes. Noticing her hand, she yanked it away quickly. "Oh, I'm sorry. Can I help you up at least?" Ayla asked, smiling, offering her hand again. The girl stared at it at a moment, hesitating before shaking her head. "I'm fine. Happens. A lot," she said, sighing. "I hope you'll forgive me for saying so, but you're the most beautiful thing I've seen all day," she said. No more than the words had left her lips, she covered her mouth with her hand and startled herself that she had even said it. "What's the matter? Afraid someone important will hear you?" the red-haired girl replied, struggling to her feet and swatting away some of the caked mud on her legs. "I just wanted..." "Oh, I'm sure you're getting used to what you want. Also, I'm not a thing, princess. I'm a person." "I'm sorry, Ayla tried again. "I don't need you making fun of me on top of everything else that's happened. Leave me alone," the girl said, shoving Ayla away as she reached for her again. The girl struggled to steady the cart on one of her knees while she lifted the wheel back on. It was a difficult task she accomplished with surprising dexterity. Seamless was indeed a well-practiced repair. With a sneer, the girl picked up the cart and continued on her way, stopping at a vendor only a few feet away. "Fresh cabbages from Stonefall Village. Half price today, I guess," she said to the vendor. Alice moved the cart up between them and held out his hand to Ayla, but she didn't take it. Instead, she stood quietly in the road with her head down, fists clenched at her side, tears streaming down her cheeks. Alice froze. He'd rarely seen her like this and wondered if the girl had said more to her than he wasn't able to hear. He considered giving that girl a piece of his mind, but he knew that even more attention was the last thing they needed. "Ayla," he said under his breath, "we have to go." After a moment, she allowed him to help her back into the seat beside him. She sniffed loudly, wiping her eyes. "I wish there was no such thing as a holy maiden," she said under her breath. And that's the end of chapter 1. I'm gonna get a drink. Hello, Fauna Flowering. How are you? You're a first-time streamer. Welcome to the channel. Today we're reading A Kiss of Light and Flame. Alright. Chapter 2. Myria accepted the meager offering from the produce vendor after several minutes of pointless haggling. Not even half price. Her first chance to visit the city, and she blew it spectacularly. This wouldn't even pay to repair the wagon, and the wagon repair would have to wait until there was food on the table. At least they would have cabbages to eat. Once she had made her way back through the city gates, she realized she couldn't get the image of the girl she'd met out of her mind. Most beautiful thing you've seen today. You're the most beautiful thing I've seen in my entire life, she mused. Must be nice living in the city and having the luxury to care about things like beauty. After a long walk back to her village, Miria dropped the cart in the garden and visited her mother inside, who was busy mending one of Miria's dresses. Without making eye contact, she dropped a bag of coin on the table and made for the door. "Hold on, Miria, what's this?" she asked, scrunching her forehead. "Here it comes. A coin for the cabbages, Mother," Miria said meekly. "What? I usually get nearly double this. What happened?" Miria rubbed her arm and tried not to think about the blonde-haired girl she'd met today. Eyes like sapphire, hair like gold, and so much sweetness in her voice. Why would a girl like that want to talk to her anyway? It was probably some kind of trick, maybe to rob her. That's it. Must have been something like that. Why would she want to talk to her, some farmer peasant so far removed from the world that she must live in? Dirt beneath her feet to be walked on. "Miria, I asked you a question," her mother repeated, slapping the table. "The cart broke down and all the cabbages fell into the mud." Her mother placed the needle into a pincushion on the table, then rubbed her face with both hands. "I warned you that you were overloading the cart. I should have never trusted you to do this. Did you at least follow my other instructions?" "The not talking to anyone but the vendor then leaving?" Mary asked, knowing full well that was the rule she was talking about. "Yes, I'll take that as a no," her mother scolded. "It's just that when the wheel came off, a girl rushed to help me. I think she really wanted to help, but I was mean to her and walked away. She didn't speak to me again after that. She hoped I would be good enough to know, but knew better. You've begged and begged for years to go into the city, and the first time I agreed to it, you turned into a catastrophe. Do you know what will happen if you let your emotions get the better of you?" her mother asked, eyes wide. "They'll kill me." "Burn you alive, Miria, just for being born. Everyone in that city hates you. They just don't know it yet. They'll all stand around and listen to you scream as the flames crawl up your body and you beg for mercy. If that girl knew what you were, she'd have called for a guard and had you arrested immediately. All it would take is for you to get angry enough to manifest your powers again, and your life would be over. They'd drag me out too, you know. It's not like they know that none of the women they burn are actually witches, nor do they care. They don't realize that not all women of the bloodline become witches. I was blessed not to have any powers, as was your grandmother, but God saw fit to curse you. Must trust no one, Miria. Do you understand me?" Miria sat quietly and practiced stoicism, pushing her emotions deep inside. So far, she barely felt them at all anymore. "Do you understand?" her mother repeated, nearly growling now. "I understand," she answered coldly. "I'm going hunting." Her mother sighed, and she plucked the needle back from the pincushion. "I'm sorry. If I could have chosen to give birth to you without powers, I would have. I only want to keep you safe." "I know, Mother. I'll be back later." Miria gathered her bow and small quiver of arrows and headed into the woods. It was illegal to hunt most things in the woods surrounding the village, but the villagers paid this law little mind, and the bishop no longer ventured beyond the city walls to go on hunts. In fact, he didn't even venture beyond the inner gates. Too paranoid a witch would hide behind a blade of grass or ride upon a falling leaf for an aerial ambush. To Miria's knowledge, there were no witches anymore. Well, none other than her. She remembered the incidences her mother spoke of, burned into her memory as if the flames of her own power bound them there. The first time it happened was when she was just a small girl. Her parents were loving to her then, and how she loved to play with the other children in the village. Her memory was especially clear of the small brown puppy who followed her everywhere she went. One day, a pack of wild dogs just outside the village attacked them and bit into her puppy first. It was the first time she'd ever felt true, deep, raw anger, and it made her feel so hot. So hot she thought she might be dying. From her hands erupted flames that burned those dogs into black, hardened shells. The flames had killed her own puppy, too. Being fortunate enough to be close by, her father was already on his way to help when he heard the growling. Without hesitating, he grabbed her up and ran home before anyone could see what had happened. It took a little convincing to make the villagers believe it was bandits trying to scare them. Bandit activity was common then. A few years later, a group of bandits came and attacked their village. The men fought them while women and children locked themselves inside. She had wanted so badly to run out and fight them with her powers. She could have saved so many, but her mother held her back. Even when they broke inside and swung their swords at her, cutting her face and arm, Her mother never stopped screaming at her not to fight. It was also the day she met Red Bear's men, who were patrolling nearby, charging in and fighting off the bandits who killed her father and might have killed them too, or worse. The bishop had stopped sending regular patrols out years ago. Miria sighed, then took a deep breath and sighed again. She hated the church and the bishop so much, but the thing she hated most, more than anything else in the world, was the Holy Maiden. Ever since she was little, she heard the stories that other kids told with such joy. The Holy Maiden was a symbol of the church's divine claim to the land, the opposite of which is symbolism. Witches were evil, ugly, terrifying creatures who, when they ruled the city, kept everyone as slaves like cattle. They burned and tortured for the joy of it, and most of all, every witch was born with nothing but evil in her heart. There was no redeeming a witch. All one could do was send them to God, so he can punish them in the flames where they drew their power. But I'm not evil, Miria thought, fighting back the tears that threatened to surface every time she'd fallen into these memories. Mustering the focus for a short period, she'd finally shot a small doe and began the steps of tracking it. She wasn't even sure how long she'd sat on that rock and waited. An hour, maybe? Perhaps more? Maybe it would have been easier to stay out of her own thoughts if she could have a friend or two, or even a hunting partner. Everyone thought she was a strange recluse, without knowing that she wanted nothing more than to rush up and talk to everyone she saw and make friends. Even now, even though they hated her. She followed the blood for a few minutes until she came upon two boys leaned over the kill, inspecting it. Bandits? No, probably some boys hunting the same forest from a neighboring village. They stared at her as she approached, one elbowing the other. Are you out here in the woods all alone? No hunting party? The elder one asked. He looked to be about 20, her age, and the other perhaps a few years younger. Most girls would have been afraid in this situation, but not Miria. She'd learned to be indifferent to nearly everything. Fighting back wasn't an option for her. If one boy survived and told the others about her power, she'd be captured and burned on public display. She drew a hunting knife from her belt and held it in front of her now. Hey now, I know my manners aren't the best, but no need to get violent, he said, holding up his hands and elbowing his partner to do the same. I'm not. It's to field dress the deer, not you. Thank you for helping to track it. Maybe you could take one leg for your troubles? The younger one elbowed him back. Looks like maybe she's sweet on you, brother. Do you want the leg or not? Miria repeated, her voice colder this time. Sorry, the elder one said. I'm afraid we need to eat this to eat. All of it, nothing personal, he said, snapping his hand to his belt and drawing his own knife. His brother did the same. Miria growled, and she could feel the heat building up inside her again, like a bottomless well of fire and fury, threatening to swallow her whole. Even though nothing could be seen yet, her skin felt kissed by the unrelenting rays of a midsummer sun. Only they were in a shaded forest. The leather on her knife handle singed and put off an odor. Sensing she was nearing the point of no return, she swallowed her anger as quickly as it built, taking several deep, shallow, slow breaths. A coolness washed over her again, and she lowered her knife. Wise choice, the younger brother said. Hurry, let's get this out of here before her friends or family come along. They wasted no time dragging the animal away, and were out of sight in no time at all. No friends would come. No family would come. No one would ever come for her because she was cursed. Even those who pretended to be kind to her would hate her in the end when they found out about her powers. She let herself imagine a world where the blonde girl rushed to her aid and scolded the boys, wrapping her arms around her and telling it was all right, that her guard wouldn't allow them to hurt her and she would be okay now. But a gust of cold wind drew her back into reality. A reality where she stood there alone, staring at the spot where the deer had been moments before. She couldn't fight back the tears any longer as she dropped to her knees and buried her face in her hands. I wish there was no such thing as witches, she whispered. Time for another sip, and then we'll do chapter 3. Chapter 3. Ayla passed back and forth in her room, with her father standing in the doorway. I heard you talk about your little adventure earlier, Ayla. I want you to know that as the Holy Maiden, the rules state that we can't punish you severely, but that doesn't stop us from punishing those who collaborate with you. We are readying Ellis for 20 lashes as we speak. I do hope that is enough to get your attention. She stopped walking, looking up at her father, the Bishop of Artheris, with narrowed eyes and clenched fists. Ellis did nothing wrong. I'm the one who asked him to take me out. He only protected me, as is his duty, unless you'd rather I'd gone alone, father. I'd rather you not gone at all, although we could be persuaded to let Ellis off for his insubordination if you'll agree to performing your sacred duties more regularly. What is it? She asked. Though the question was rhetorical, it made her stomach churn. Her father had been urging her to attend the burnings for months now, but she'd always refused. There are 3 more witches that will be burned tomorrow. I expect you to read the Maiden's Vow at this one. The people need your reassurance that what we are doing is just and the very will of God. Your absence has led to the people's faith becoming shaken. It has encouraged barbarians like that Red Bear bandit to cause us trouble. It has given him the false impression that his cause is just. He and others must be reminded that he is mistaken. Ayla turned away. I won't. Then perhaps Ellis has outlived his usefulness. Clearly he is corrupting you. I should have known better than allowing him to be your guardian based on skill and attachment alone. His common blood has made him ill-suited for such a critical duty, her father said, raising a brow. If it were a bluff, she'd been able to see it. Only this was her father, and she knew it wasn't. He was willing to sacrifice anyone to get what he wanted without a second thought. Ellis was just some disposable sword to him. Even if it took 3 men to replace him, he'd do it. If he had to lock her in her room for the rest of her days because no one was strong enough to defend her, he'd happily do that too. I hate, she started, stopping herself before she confessed any further. What? Speak up, my dear. I'm afraid I couldn't hear you, he said, smiling now. I'll do it if you let Ellis go. No lashes, not even one, or it won't come, she pleaded for her friend. Very well. I may turn a blind eye to your future adventures should your devotion to your role remain steadfast. Bear that in mind. Yes, Father. The next morning, Ellis was waiting in the courtyard for Ayla to arrive. I heard about what you did, Ayla. You shouldn't have. I can take the punishment. He threatened, or at least he implied a threat of your execution this time, Ellis. I couldn't bear it. You're my only friend in all the world. Ellis reached out and put a hand on her shoulder, though he wanted nothing more than to kiss her now. I don't think you understand what these executions are like. Forgive me for speaking out of turn, but these women are innocent, most likely. I know, Ellis. I just don't know what I can do. Whether I go or don't go, they will still take place. Maybe he's right, in a way. Maybe my being there will at least calm the people and maybe convince them that what we're doing is right. Ayla, he said, letting his hand return to his side. If I go, he said we could visit places and he'd be willing to turn a blind eye, assuming we're disguised. No more having to sneak out or risk you bearing the punishment. No more ripped shirts needing to be delivered to the seamstress. I desperately want any freedom I can cling to, Ellis, while I still can. Am I evil for wanting such a thing? Ellis sighed, shaking his head. There isn't an evil bone in your body. That I'm sure of, he said, offering his best faux smile. He had not had a continuous night's sleep since he started tending these executions, and part of him wishes he'd simply died instead of her experiencing the same. To most of the others in the ruling class of the church, this was a sacred duty, a righteous task. Ridding the world of evil, traitorous riches. What more holy task could there be? However, this wasn't Ayla. Ayla was blessed. No, cursed with a kind heart. The carriage is ready for you, holy maiden, a guard called out to them as the ornate carriage neared them. Please come aboard. The execution of the witches will begin shortly. Ayla nodded, offering her hand to the guard, who helped her into the carriage, waiting a moment for Ellis to board beside her. The ride was quiet, but they were both thinking the same thing. They thought of the women and the pain the other would feel, and whether they had any power to affect the outcome. That question had an obvious answer. They could not. When they arrived, Ayla was again led her next location, atop the platform in the inner city square, where 3 women were tied to wooden pillars. 2 would not look at her. One only held a look of utter contempt and disgust in her eyes. Ayla faced the crowd and stared down at the piece of paper she'd brought along. A reminder of the maiden's vows, one of many promises made on her behalf with no choice of her own. She started, pausing a moment, considering one last time if there was any way she could escape this duty. As she eyes the many guards surrounding the stage and the hulking man standing beside her on the platform with the torch in his grasp, she knew the answer, as she already known before she'd even arrived. I swear to all the people of Arthurus, the City of Roses, that I shall oversee the purging of these evil usurpers from our land. Long have we... She swallowed hard. Long have we been vigilant against their ever-present threat, these witches of the old world. No longer will parents fear the abduction of their children in the night, to be sacrificed in demonic rituals of witchcraft. No more will our people lie awake at night, fearing the return of witches. I, the Holy Maiden, swear to condemn their souls to hell, where they will face their true divine punishment. And in this fitting way we send them off, a farewell far too kind and far more than they deserve. Even though her expression remained stony, tears had dripped onto the pages without her realizing, and her hand shook terribly as she tried to fold the note into its previous shape. She struggled in vain, even to do that, before feeling a hand settle onto hers. Ellis nodded in understanding. Though he couldn't speak any words to confirm he knew her feelings, his troubled eyes said it all. He clasped her hand in his and led her to the edge of the platform, signaling the beginning of the execution. The executioner lit the first fire, then the second, then the third, as though he were lighting a fire at camp for the night. No sign of hesitation. No sign of remorse. If there had ever been a flicker of empathy in the executioner's heart, repetition had snuffed it out. He had burned so many now that one more likely felt like a raindrop in a long storm. It didn't take long for the burning to begin. Then the profession of innocence, and finally the wails of pain. Ayla clung to Ellis, burying her face in his shoulder, sobbing. As the flame consumed the last woman, she cried out to her. "Holy Maiden, please help me!" was all she spoke before the screams were all that could be heard. She gasped and choked on her sobs and would have collapsed to the ground if it weren't for Ellis holding her up. He led her toward the edge of the stage, where a guard stepped in front of them. "The flames still burn, Guardian. She must stay." "She's stayed long enough," Ellis said, his voice level and cold, without a single hint of emotion. "Guardian, I must insist." Ellis placed his hand on the hilt of his sword. "Step aside or die here." The guard hesitated for a moment, looking at the other guard beside him for support, but didn't receive it. "All right, since the Holy Maiden is not feeling well, I'm sure she'll be forgiven for leaving a little early. There's no need for threats, Guardian," he said with a bow. No one really knew what a threat from Ellis meant. Not really. They knew Sir Blaine Grave, captain of Bishop Barthow's personal guard and living legend, selected him. It was said that before being selected to become the top knight in the city, Sir Grave fought over 100 duels, never losing one. Still, many felt that Ellis had received the position only on that false claim, instead of being appointed because of the Holy Maiden's pleas alone. It was not a theory anyone had been willing to test. "Thank you, on behalf of the Holy Maiden. She will rest and return to her duties tomorrow. Be sure to inform Bishop Eilenberg of her success in carrying out her duty. He will be pleased to hear." The guard nodded as he moved aside. "If a Holy Maiden ever uses her powers on an enemy of the Church, especially a witch or one aligned with the witches, she will lose that power forever and die the most agonizing of all deaths at the hand of God's vengeance for her betrayal," Ayla remembered her father saying. It was an old statement in their text, or she would have just assumed her father made it up to prevent her from helping these innocent women. Ayla skipped dinner even at the insistence of the maids who tended to her. She did not even thank Ellis for helping her leave early. She had not said another word to anyone the entire evening. When she tried to escape to her sanctuary of sleep, only the women's screams awaited her there. It was the end of chapter 3. I'm getting another sip. I keep beating my water bottle and everything. It's good. It's all good. Excuse me. Alright. Miria sat in the forest a long while, until only moonlight remained, and thought about what might have happened if she'd just burned the two boys to a crisp and walked away with her dinner. Dead men tell no tales, after all. She was so angry she could barely think straight. The sadness came, yes, but only briefly. In all other times, anger filled her heart, and she hated the way it made her feel. Which, of course, only made her angrier. But more than that, more than the anger and sadness, Miria had an overwhelming desire not to prove the stories true. Witches could be good, gentle, kind. She was a good witch, wasn't she? At last, she worked up the courage to return home, empty-handed, navigating the forest under a dim light. She could have navigated in complete darkness if she had to, or even blindfolded. The forest had become a friend of sorts for her in absence of the humankind, and she'd familiarized herself with many edible vegetables and habits of the animals of the forest. Often she wondered if she could just disappear into them forever and never have to worry about hiding her powers. But even that wasn't possible. Woodlands were not nearly that vast, and being bordered by other villages, it was common to run into others. Arriving home, it surprised her to find many horses tied outside, and she hurried inside to see what was happening. Sitting in their kitchen speaking with her mother was a massive man with hair as red as her own. Despite his size, his smile was warm as he turned to her and nodded when she came in. "You must be Miria. I'm Nigel. Sorry to intrude on your home like this and at this late hour. I was just here speaking with your mother. My men are butchering your kill from earlier, and there are two boys from the neighboring village who have something they'd like to say to you." Miri had just noticed them to her side when she came in, and for a moment feared the worst. That perhaps she defended the children of some local bandits. Both boys approached her, and she took a step back. Seeing their mistake, they took a step back too, removing their hats and bowing their heads. The elder of the two spoke first. "My brother and I would like to beg your forgiveness. Being desperate and hungry isn't any excuse to treat fellow villagers like we're common bandits. Red Bear taught us better than this. We're very sorry." Miria said nothing. An apology that came because of someone else's pressure felt hardly at all like an apology, even though they seemed sincere. "Hey, we mean it," the younger brother pleaded. "That's enough," the red-haired man at the table said. "It's up to her if she's willing to forgive you or not. She doesn't have to decide now. Go out and take care of the horses. I have something to discuss with Miria and her mother." The two kept their head down and obeyed. The two other men in the room took the hint and stepped out as well. Once he was certain only the three of them remained within hearing distance, he spoke. "The boys mentioned they smelled burning leather from the handle of your knife, and the surrounding air seemed to grow hotter when they threatened you. Before you panic and before you answer, know that I am a great admirer of the old ways. That includes the witches of my grandfather's days, though we've thought them extinct. Only the privileged aristocrats of the inner city and their precious holy maiden delude themselves into believing that the women they've been burning lately are actually witches. Everyone else knows better. It's an old secret that witches can't be burned by any fire on this earth, so the irony is that killing them this way actually proves they aren't witches." She'd wanted to say how awful that was, but it was awful either way. Would it really have been any better if they were proper witches, if it was her instead? "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. Maybe they were nervous about getting caught and imagined it. Her mother reached across the table and grabbed her hand. "We've met you before, you know," he said. "The day your father died. The day you got those scars. I'm better known to you as Red Bear. I've been searching all these years for a witch, and I just hoped that maybe I'd finally found one. I'd like to involve a witch in our efforts to retake this city from the bishop, to serve as our symbol, the counter to their holy maiden. Our own great witch. Alas, either you're unable or unwilling to fill that role, but..." He paused, looking at Miria's mother, then back to Miria. "So it was you," Miria said, looking down on the table. "Thank you. I never got to say that to you, but thank you." I will tell you what I plan to do. We'll be by this village often in the coming days, so you can come up to me if you have anything you wish to say. I take no pleasure in saying this, but I intend to assassinate their holy maiden. Despite their best efforts among her several sisters, the current holy maiden appears to be the only one. She has no daughters of her own, and with the quick death of her mother, the line can end with her if we act quickly. Without its symbol of authority, those occupying our lands can no longer claim divine favor. They'll be no different from any other occupying enemy force. Outsiders are likely to withdraw aid. Even the church itself may order a withdrawal. I'm sure she's done plenty to deserve it. She probably laughs at those women as they suffer and die, Miria said, not sure if she fully believed the words even as she said them. Shall I tell you more about the witches? I don't suspect the knowledge is common enough anymore to be taught. Something about seeing this hulking man covered in armor, hair, and muscle, with a beard that ran down to his chest, articulating history like a scholar, felt odd. But she'd always been so curious about the origin of the witches. Even if it gave her away, she had to know. Tell me about them, she said, trying her best to pretend not to care as much as she actually did, and likely failing spectacularly. Everything taught about the witches now is propaganda. In fact, so much propaganda surrounds them that I can't even be sure if everything I'm about to tell you is fact. The woodlands surrounding the city were once much vaster than they are now, and the city itself wasn't all that elaborate. The witches here were so peaceful, so reclusive, in fact, that truly believed in their community. The few truly believed in their ability to command fire. Like the holy maidens, only women were born with this power for reasons that were never known. Unfortunately for them, their homeland was rich with resources of all kinds and vast tracts of unoccupied land between kingdoms that made its dirt as valuable as gold. One day, the church attacked the city, and quickly everyone realized that the so-called rumors were real. Once provoked, the witches drove the attackers back with such overwhelming magical power that it was thought no one would ever have the gall to attack these lands again. However, seizing an opportunity, the church did what they do best. They seized the narrative. Stories spread far and wide of slavery, sacrifice of children for demonic rituals, and a purging of God's people from the lands. With how isolated the witches had been, stories that countered these were uncommon. So in only months, the church set their full fighting force, along with thousands of troops from other kingdoms. In the end, numbers prevailed. Each witch killed hundreds of invaders, some thousands. Yet, with siege weaponry and overwhelming numbers, victory for the witches was impossible. Miria sighed. If this is lost knowledge, why does no one else know it, and how do you know it? Because I am the true heir to this city. My great-grandfather ruled the city as an independent king, and my family were long the scholars responsible for keeping the records. They smuggled many out during the battle and kept secret all these years. You don't really look like a scholar, Miria said, with her words sounding more like an insult than she'd meant them to. In times of peace, a man should be a scholar. In times of war, a warrior. It was not my choice to be the latter, young Miria. Right. Sorry. I'm sure it wasn't. If we hear anything, I'll come to you. I'm exhausted, so if you don't mind, I'd like to get some sleep, Miria said, coldly. She drew a sharp, disapproving glare from her mother. Unfortunately, Miria saw right through this request. Red Bear would probably be a much better ruler than Bishop Bartho, but she wasn't about to become his version of the Holy Maiden. In fact, considering it honestly as she had during this conversation, she now almost felt pity for the Holy Maiden. For a moment, she wondered if perhaps she was being used against her will to represent a side in a war she didn't want a part of. Of course, this was all a dream. Someone in the church disagreed with them. Already, this is rare enough, and it was probably kept so private that they dare not even say it aloud to their spouse. That anyone in the church would ever oppose it openly for all to see, the day would never come. If she ever saw the Holy Maiden, she supposed she'd consider doing the deed herself and ignoring the consequences. Then there'd be no more Holy Maiden and no great witch. No more pawns in wars that shouldn't be fought to justify one side's divine right to harm and rule over others. Maybe the story Red Bear told of the witches was true, and they just wanted to live their lives in peace. It's possible she wasn't so much different from them. Maybe they weren't good, And they weren't evil either. Maybe they were just people. With so many other witches around, able to be both witches and normal. Miria envied the idea of them and what they might have had for a time. Alright, I apologize again for the intrusion and what those boys did to you earlier. I hope we're able to speak again soon. Until then, hang in there. With our movement in this area, the church's soldiers may come knocking and asking questions. They'll increase patrols along the road as well. Miria's mother nodded. With his exit, Miria stormed off to bed, ignoring the pleas of her mother to discuss what he'd asked of her. Although she was opposed to the thought that she, as one person, could turn the tide of this battle and save countless innocent women, kept her from a peaceful rest. That's the end of chapter 4. We'll see if I can make it through the whole book. Might be a little bit hard on my voice. Also, Sunny has decided to visit. He thought he should interrupt. So, like, when my model got really small, that was his tail in front of the webcam. So, there it is again. It's gonna freak out. Oh, it's around 3 hours? Okay. But, of course, we'll be taking breaks in between. In fact, after this chapter, I'll probably take, like, a short 5 or 10 minute break. You were thinking of Detective Trigger? Sonny. He loves to make my character jerk around. He thinks it's a whole lot of fun. He's also moving the microphone. Because he likes sharp things. I should have gotten this thing I saw in the store today for him. You mount it on like a flat surface and it's a self-grooming thing. He probably would like something like that. Considering he likes to rub up against everything while he's like happy. And interrupting people. That's his favorite pastime. It's his favorite hobby. Is to like scream in the morning and come bother me streaming. He won't bother Mr. Brogath when he's streaming. But if he's working, if he's in here streaming with the door closed, he just screams in the morning. At like 7 o'clock in the morning, he'll just sit there and scream. And wake up everybody in the house. He just likes to scream. Alright, let's continue. Chapter 5. Ayla awoke the next morning, only having slept for an hour or two, and feeling worse than if she hadn't at all. The voice of the woman who called out to her for help repeated in her thoughts. Could she have helped her? Could she have made a difference? No. Thinking about this was unavoidable, but pointless. Ellis waved at her as she entered the courtyard, doing his best to pretend nothing had ever happened. He knew Ayla better than anyone, and her heart was so much softer and kinder than his. He imagined that as much as he'd struggled to cope with what he'd seen, Ayla must be in agony. It was only that he wanted to do everything he could to protect her, not just as her guardian, and not just against physical threats. Good morning. I take it you have somewhere in mind for your father to turn a blind eye to during visiting? He asked, smiling. Actually, I do have somewhere in mind, and I'd like to deliver something to someone, she said, returning his smile. Oh? We're out delivering gifts today, are we? Sounds like fun. I'll fetch it. What is it? One of those small carts like the girl from the other day was pulling. A good one. Nothing that stands out, but make it one of quality. Ellis raised a brow. The barracks has many carts like that, and they won't miss one. Our destination? Stonefall, she said, looking away as she blushed. Stonefall. That small village a little way outside the city? You want to go to Stonefall. Right. Got it. What, you don't? I can go all by myself, you know. Father didn't say I had to take you with me. Maybe I should start calling you princess, too. You're gonna let these new freedoms go to your head. She gasped. Don't you dare call me that, Ellis Brindle. And yes, I intend to thoroughly abuse my privileges over the next few days. Do you fault me? After seeing what Father did to those poor women, I'd prefer to be away from him and all his associates as much as possible. Does that include me? Ellis asked, grinning. Of course it doesn't include you. Now, are you going to get that cart and ready our carriage or not? He snapped to salute. Yes, Your Highness. He ran, and she ran after him a little way, shaking her fists in the air in mocking indignation, before bursting into laughter. Ellis couldn't have been happier to hear those laughs. A moment later, he returned with the 2-horse wagon and the cart sitting in the back. Shall we go? He asked. She smiled and nodded, allowing him to help her into the seat beside him. Thank you for taking me, Ellis, she said sweetly. I'm doomed to a life of being your partner in crime, I'm afraid, he said, shrugging. He whipped the reins and they made their way out of the city. Both were disguised, a guard and an inner city noblewoman. An odd thing to see on the road, but nothing more. They arrived at the village and Ayla found herself in awe of everything she was seeing. This was the first time in as long as she could remember that she'd gone outside the city gates. Had she ever gone outside the city? Perhaps it was the first time. It was almost too hard for her to believe. Ellis, have I ever been outside the city? She asked him, her voice lowered as they entered the sagging makeshift village gate. You haven't. This is the first, as far as I'm aware. She breathed in deep through her nose and nodded. Are you nervous? He asked. Rather than answering, she simply nodded again. Ellis smiled and hopped down off the wagon and helped her down. A man approached them. Sorry to bother. Are the two of you lost? This is Stonefall, isn't it? The man nodded. Yes, sir. Stonefall. Then I thank you for your concern, good sir, but we're not lost after all. Then, the man eyed the wagon suspiciously. Can I help you with something? Ayla stepped forward, smiling from ear to ear. I'm looking for a red-haired girl about my age. She has a scar on her left cheek and on her upper left arm. We met the other day, and I have something I need to give her. The man tilted his head, then looked to Ellis, who shrugged. You don't mean Miria? Why, she's only been to the city once. Just the other day, as you mentioned. Don't tell me she's gotten us into trouble. Ayla raised her hands in front of her. No, it's nothing like that. It's just that I wanted to... She stopped speaking and took several slow, deep breaths while the man looked at them as though they were a type of creature he was seeing for the first time. Can you tell me where she is? He pointed behind him. 4 homes behind you. By the time you pass the second home, you'll see her in the cart in their garden to your left, he said, still squinting at Ayla as though she had a giant growth on her face. Thank you, sir. Come, Ellis, let's go deliver this to her. After a moment of struggling, Ellis unloaded the cart from the back of the wagon and carried it behind him as they walked. As they approached, they could see Miria outside, hunched over some plants in her garden, watering them with a pail. Hello, cabbage girl, Ayla said, waving. Miria spun around, nearly falling and dropping her pail of water onto the ground. She put her hands on her hips as she watched all the water drain out. My name is Miri, and you... Wait, you're the girl from the city. Ayla nodded several times enthusiastically. I am. I brought you a present. She pointed to the cart. Ellis, could you put that down beside her damaged cart? Miria stood, trying to quickly decide what she should say, but could find nothing but silent disbelief. There, Ellis said, dusting off his hands. 1 new cart. This one is pretty high quality, but light. Shouldn't give you any trouble. But why? Miria finally asked. Why would you do this for me? Did the people in the city get angry at me for bringing in such an eyesore in town? That's it, isn't it? Ayla held up her hands in front of her. No, that's not it. I just wanted to give it to you. I'm not familiar with this area, and I was hoping you would accept it as payment for showing me around. Miriam looked between the cart and to Ayla, to the empty watering pail on the ground, to the cabbages in her garden, to Ellis, and then repeated the entire process again. She really had absolutely no idea what was going on, and was having a hard time following. Please? Ayla asked, clasping her hands together, speaking sweetly as she could manage. Miriam felt her cheeks warm, and for a moment worried that her powers might be about to manifest without a reason. It only occurred to her after considering the possibility that this was in fact only simple blushing. But why? Okay, I suppose I have some time to take you into the forest. It's one of my favorite places here. I know it really well. I think I hope you'll like it. Hope she liked it? Why did she say something so stupid? She's the one who wanted to see this place. Who cares if she likes it? Ayla hopped on her feet and smiled even brighter than before. Okay, Ellis, could you take care of our horses, please? We won't be gone too long. But my lady, he said, careful not to say her name. Shouldn't I come with you? I'll be all right, she reassured him. She was probably right. This was the last place anyone would expect to find her. That much was for sure. Please keep it to less than an hour, all right? Ayla nodded and waved Miria to join her. The two of them walked into the woods behind the village, though Miria was careful not to go so far as the day before. Last thing she wanted to do was run into other people again. She decided to only go as far as the stream that ran through the center, a place she'd often go to be alone with her thoughts. Come to think of it, this was the first time she'd ever brought anyone to here to be with her. She sat down on a log, and Ayla sat beside her. "This is the most beautiful sight I've ever laid eyes on," Ayla said. "It's one of my favorite places. I'll often come here alone and just sit and enjoy the sounds of the stream, the wind through the trees, the birds chirping, and..." She looked up only to find that Ayla's eyes were locked with her own. She'd been looking at her when she'd said it. "Oh, you meant..." Ayla nodded. "You! I meant you. The stream, wonderful though as it may be, doesn't compare to you." Miria could feel her cheeks nearly setting ablaze, and her stomach clenched as though she were falling from a great height. She'd want to return the compliment because she felt the same way, but feared she was only being lured into some awful trick. That several others would jump out at any moment and start pointing and laughing at her for her blushing and for her falling for such an obvious trap. "Maybe we should go back?" Miria asked, hanging her head. "All right, but first I wanted to ask you something. It's what I came all the way here for, besides giving you the cart. The cart was just an excuse. The question is the real reason." Okay, I suppose a question wouldn't hurt," Miria squeaked, a wave of embarrassment washing over her again as her voice cracked. "There's a masquerade ball tomorrow. I wondered if you might come with me, as my date." Miria's head felt light, and she worried she might faint if she couldn't hold it together. Her palms perspired and her hands trembled. "That's allowed? It's not that big of a deal here, but aren't you an inner city woman?" "It would be frowned upon, yes, but my father is an important man in the city, and I can get away with things others can't. I've never been in my life wanted to abuse that privilege, not even once, until now. Besides, we can try to be a little sneaky, too. We can fit you for a suit, and no one will be the wiser. It's impolite to ask someone's identity at a masquerade ball, and girls have been known to go together this way and get away with it." "Really?" Miria asked, astonished to hear that not even the church could stick to their own rules, though she shouldn't have been surprised. "So, will you?" Miria considered the offer. She dreamed of visiting the city ever since she was a child, and as far as she'd ever made it was to fall in the mud in the city gates. And now, an inner-city masquerade ball with the highest status of people in the entire city, and with this absolutely breathtaking woman sitting next to her. Everything inside her brain told her this was foolish. It felt out of place, a trap, a way to take advantage of her. Worse yet, what if they'd somehow discovered she was a witch? Not that if that was the case, there's no way this delicate girl would come out to the forest alone with her. No, this was truly an honest offer. Her brain told her to run, but her heart asked her what she had to lose. "I would very much love to be your date," she squeaked again, before clearing her throat. "That's wonderful," Ayla said, flinging her arms around her and hugging her tightly. Miria felt, in that moment, even that the flames of her magic couldn't compare to the heat rushing to her face. And yet, somehow, she never felt happier. That's the end of chapter 5. There are... how many chapters are in this book again? I don't even remember. It's been a long time since I read this book. We're almost halfway there. I think there's 14 chapters in an epilogue, I think. Something like that. We're on chapter 6. I'm going to... Mr. Of course, Mr. Brogath doesn't remember. He's old. Anyway, I'm going to take like a 5-minute break or so, and I'm going to be right back. I'm going to go use the little dragon's room. Alright, I'm back. Finishing my other half of my cheese stick. I grabbed a snack too. Interesting. There's actually a lot of people on my streaming list today. We'll see if anybody makes it to the end of this book. Or till 10 or 11. Most of the time when I'm done streaming, there's like nobody on. All right. Time to continue. Chapter 6. After a quick, but not the whole story excuse to her mother, Miria agreed to ride back to the city with Ayla and Alice to stay in a room in the castle as Ayla's personal guest. Secretly, of course. From the moment they rode through the inner city gates, to the castle's giant doors, to the servants guiding her to her room, Miria was so overwhelmed by the newness and wonder of it all. She'd always dreamed of visiting the castle someday, but she never allowed herself to believe that it would become a reality. That, and there was the fact that she was a witch. A witch inside the walls of the castle itself. If they found out, they'd kill her in an instant. Then again, that was a risk no matter where she was. And these days, it was a risk whether one was actually a witch or wasn't. Being in the wrong place at the wrong time was grounds for burning at the stake. Part of her wanted to imagine the looks on their faces when they realized she couldn't be burned by any flame on earth. At the moment, however, she had far more pleasant things to imagine, like tomorrow's ball. The warm bubble bath they'd drawn for her was out of this world, and the clothes they gave her to wear to bed likely cost more than her mother's house. Pajamas. She couldn't get enough of it. The next morning, Miria awoke with a servant standing above her. Startled, she nearly fled at the sight. Miss Miria, good morning. My name is Claire, and I'll be preparing you for tonight's ball. My lady has given me very specific instructions. We have a discreet tailor who will prepare your tuxedo, but that will be after lunch. For lunch, my lady was hoping you would accompany her to the market to sample some of the food there. Miria smiled, as if I could ever say no to an invitation like that. Our lady is wonderful, isn't she? And she's taking such a strong liking to you, so I can only assume you must be wonderful too. Most of the noblewomen in the palace look down on us servants, but not Ayla. Oh, but anyway, goodness, I'm running my mouth far too much. I roughly estimated your size, so please let me help you get this dress on, Claire said, picking a dress up off the table and behind her and holding it up. That's all right. I'm sure I can get into it myself. Excuse me for 1 second. Ooh, okay. Nonsense. I was told to make you feel special today, so that's what I'm going to do. I know you always dress yourself, but just for today, may I please help? Wow, so this is what noblewomen encountered every day. Miria couldn't say the thought of being helped to get into her dress was exactly something that made her feel special, but clearly it meant a lot to the servant. Miria smiled and got out of bed, reluctantly allowing the servant to help her get dressed. Then she was served a light breakfast, followed by far too much fuss about her hair and makeup. They'd insisted they were only doing the bare minimum, since they'd have to redo it all tonight, but it certainly didn't feel that way. Miri had never worn makeup in her life. After Claire finally rushed her out of the room, she met Ayla just outside the castle entrance. The two walked through the gates of the inner city together with Ellis, who felt very much like an awkward third wheel. By now, it was finally dawning on him just what sort of feelings Ayla had developed for the girl. Part of him felt jealous. A big part of him. But something about seeing her smile so hard made him forget it all. And he was willing to play the bodyguard and carry of shopping items for the pair of them. In fact, the more they spent together, the more Ellis could feel himself developing a different sort of admiration for Miria. She wasn't so much different from him when it came right down to it. A fish out of water. A low-born outsider who others took pleasure in silently looking down upon. Miria hadn't realized it yet, he hoped, and he wasn't about to break it to her. Not today. After a few hours of visiting all the market stalls, tasting pastries and cakes, and trying on many hats, the two headed back and went their separate ways, with Clara taking Miria to the tailor she'd promised earlier. After suffering the embarrassment of having someone's hands touching all over her, they gave her a tuxedo within an hour. Clara told her that normally a tuxedo like this must be ordered months in advance, but they had given this one special priority. All other orders were placed on hold, even ball attendees. While in some ways this made her feel special, she was worrying about the sort of attention she might get. Once dressed, Claire spent some time making her look more masculine. Not that it was difficult, given her tanned and very average skin, and the scar across her cheek. She was given a large, typical man's mask, and her hair was done up in a ponytail, as she was told some princes like to wear their hair long this way. Most of the men Miria grew up around wore their hair short. Long hair just meant more time wasted washing and more chance to get their hair caught in dangerous work equipment and cause injury. She was wrapped around her torso to minimize her most recognizable feminine assets. Not that she had much going on there either, especially not compared to Ayla. Once properly adorned, she was again rushed outside, this time in secret out the back, where she saw Ayla standing there waiting for her with a smile on her face. This time, Ellis wasn't present. Seeing Ayla took her breath away in a way she never imagined possible. She never thought that she could have feelings of friendship toward another person, much less this feeling. Her cheeks grew hot, and she couldn't bring herself to stare for too long, almost as though she was looking into the sun itself. "Well, don't just stand there. Aren't you going to offer me your arm, handsome sir?" she teased. Miria walked forward, suddenly finding it near impossible to swallow, and offered a trembling arm to Ayla, who grabbed it and held it tight to her chest. Miria felt her face must have looked as red as her hair, and was thankful her mask hid it. "Where's Ellis?" Miria finally asked. "Oh, since we're in the inner city and there will be plenty of guards around, he was confident I would be completely safe. He asked if he could catch up on his training." "Must he ask you permission?" Miria asked, confused. Well, no. I mean, he's supposed to, but Ellis and I are good friends, and he knows he doesn't need to." Miria seized the opportunity to return some of Ayla's teasing back at her as they walked around to the castle entrance. "So why isn't Ellis going with you? He's certainly handsome enough, and clearly he's fond of you." Ayla hung her head. "I'm not sure I want to talk about it. Sorry." "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean... I know Ellis likes me. It's just that I love him very much, but as a brother. As my very best friend. He's never stated his feelings, but I know them. I feel pain that this wall might be upsetting for him, my being unable to return his feelings for me in the sort of way he'd wish." "Unable to?" Miria asked, confused. "Well, I know it might not be a popular answer among those with expectations for me, but you might have noticed that I just like girls better in that way, I suppose. Do you? Oh no, I can't believe how silly it sounds asking you this aloud when we're already walking to the ball like this. I'm sorry. If you don't feel the same, you can at least enjoy this ball with me before returning home." "I understand. Please don't feel pressured." Miria considered the question honestly. "Well, I guess I've never really thought about it before. I've always just been alone. Never really made friends, and I've never had someone show interest in me before. I don't really know what it's like, I guess." "Oh," Ayla said, brushing a strand of her hair behind her ear. "I really like you, though. I wish I hadn't said those things to you the first time we met in the city. Just that most people I've met haven't been nearly as kind as you, and I question your motives." "My motives were very self-serving, as it turns out," Ayla said, winking. "I'm glad," Miria said as they were ushered inside the ball. For hours they danced together. Ayla did her best to guide Miria, as much as possible at least, considering she never danced a day in her life. Miria deepened her voice, unintentionally humorous, and despite the obvious suspicions of those around her, they politely turned a blind eye to her blunders. Afterwards, Ayla invited Miria to join her on the balcony of her room. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "I really get to indulge in such pleasures. Usually it's all, go here, meet this person, do this, do that, don't disappoint these people, and well, I guess you know what it's like in your own way." Miria smiled, only just now realizing she was holding Ayla's hand, which only made her smile more as they stared up at the stars. In my case, it's stay away from these people, don't talk to this person, travel the road at this time to avoid travelers, no, you can't go to the city, and similar things. Same lack of freedom, I suppose. Ayla reached up, removing her mask, and her smile disappeared. May I kiss you? She asked, her voice quieter now. Without answering, Mira pulled her close and touched her lips to hers. A jolt of shock traveled through her body. Where had she even found the courage to do such a thing? It was probably because she'd been hoping for this moment the whole night, but lacked the courage to suggest it herself. After a moment, and what a moment it was, they separated. I want to see you again, Miria. More than anything. I don't want to take my eyes off you. I want to just stand here and talk to you like this forever and never go back to what it was like before we met. I feel the same, Miria said, thinking about how much her mother would disapprove of this. Not because of her feelings for Ayla, but because of how many people she'd been seen by tonight. What if any of them could somehow discover her secret? For now, she didn't care. Hugging Ayla tightly, she shared her feeling of never wanting this moment to end. Okay, KP Prophet. Thank you for joining and lurking. Have a good rest of your evening or day. Whatever time zone you're in. Gotta get another zip of water. Ever since my cat came in here, I feel like I've gotten like a whole bunch of hair on my nose. I can't get rid of that feeling. There is no hair on my nose, I've checked. His hair is so fluffy and fuzzy that it like tickles your nose like forever. You get that feeling. Alright, so we're at chapter 7 now. We did the kiss scene. The kiss scene finally happened. We're halfway through the book. And we made it in like less than 2 hours, so it might take us till 11 to do this, but hey. Nobody's counting, right? Nobody's counting the time. Alright. Chapter 7. They were awake until the early morning hours talking, when Ellis finally came to take Miria home. Ayla couldn't remember the last time she stayed up all night like that, just talking about some things that were important to her, with someone who would listen. Aside from Miria, only Ellis seemed to care about her thoughts and feelings. To everyone else, she was only the Holy Maiden, a symbol to serve the hopes and dreams of others, with no hopes or dreams of her own. Just a tool capable of the holy magic that gave the bishop his divine grasp over the city. Your father has summoned you, a voice behind her startled her, just as she'd consider trying to steal a quick nap before breakfast. Tell him I'll come see him after breakfast, Ayla mumbled, waving the servant away. He insisted you come immediately and that breakfast could wait. He seemed in good spirits, so hopefully the talk won't be too upsetting. Ayla nodded, rising to her feet, sighing and exiting her room toward the bishop's throne room. Once inside, her father waved her over with a wide smile across his face. Did you have a good time at the ball, my dear? He asked. Sonny is making my... Which is funny because he's not even in front of it right now. Could it be that he knew and was actually okay with it? I did, Father. A wonderful time, in fact. Why do you ask? The ball was a sort of surprise for you. I'm sure it didn't escape your notice, all the handsome men in attendance. Now she understood where this was going. Only one individual commanded my interest. I didn't notice the others. No one? The bishop asked. Truly? The red-haired guest I brought is the one who captured my heart. I could not even tell you a single thing about the others. Really, after all this waiting, the peasant woman is the only person to stir romantic feelings in you. Wonderful, he shouted, slamming his drink on the table next to him, clenching his teeth. You knew? She asked, feeling herself becoming afraid now. Of course I knew. Bring them in, he shouted again, waving for one of his servants, who disappeared for a moment before reappearing with 6 young men around her age. I won't even mention where these men are from, or their names. I only introduce them so that you can judge them on their appearance and charm alone. This is your privilege as the Holy Maiden. Most other noblewomen are married to men who are already selected for them. You get to choose, and among the world's finest. Ayla crossed her arms, and she could feel her face heating up. The thing she disliked more than almost anything else was being put into a position of being unkind to people who had done nothing to deserve it. She was sure that some, perhaps all of these young men, were just fine and would make someone a great husband. She didn't want any of these men. "You go first," her father said, pointing to the dark-haired, tall, and tan young man closest to him. The young man stepped forward and bowed deeply. "Holy maiden, my father is a duke and I'm about to inherit his status. Through my power, I can offer you jewels and the finest silks in all the continent. No offense to your wonderful city, but the kind that just cannot be found here. You will be the envy of every woman, as they can only be in awe of your unmatched beauty." "How nice," Ayla tried, tapping her finger on her forearm, arms still crossed. "Next," the bishop said, pointing to the next man. This one had blonde hair like hers and blue eyes that were a shade lighter. Definitely the most handsome among the six. "Holy maiden, it's true that my competitor would adorn you in those fine silks and many fancy jewels. My kingdom is known for having the fastest horses on the continent and the most skilled riders. I could take you out riding every day across the expansive fields. With the speed of our horses, you could travel back and forth between your home and my kingdom in mere days." That's great, I guess," Ayla responded, becoming more and more irritated as each second passed. If she had to hear one more boast. "Next," her father called again. This young man wore a military uniform, and his muscled body pushed against every thread of the fabric. "Holy maiden," he started, first looking to the bishop and then to her. "I must be truthful. My father has ordered me to come. You are surely a respectable and beautiful woman, and what man would not be happy to be chosen by you? But my heart belongs to another. If you don't select me today, I will convince my father to allow me to marry her. Since I was barely old enough to have feelings toward another, I have only ever longed for her. We've confessed to one another, so I will only ask thee, please do not choose me." The bishop only sighed, slapping his hand onto his forehead. Ayla uncrossed her arms and approached the man, her smile returning. She took him by the hand. "Your lover. How fortunate is she to have a man so gallant and true, and so devoted to her he would pass up a greater power just to be together. I, too, have already someone in my heart." Hang on one second. Sorry, I had to remove Sonny. He decided now was the time for knocking things off the desk. He took my art pen and just swatted it off the desk as hard as he could. Just, I wasn't paying enough attention to him. I was reading the story. Now I gotta find my spot. The man smiled and gave her hand a squeeze before releasing it. "I hope you'll be permitted to choose them instead." The bishop stood to his feet. "Oh, for the love of... Are you referring to Ellis? Of all this theater and poetry, why not just say it? A man gallant and true, passing any chance of having status just to be near you. May as well just announce his name rather than playing these games. Everyone in the castle can see plainly the way he feels toward you. However, I must stress to you that if he's not of proper birth, his station is far too low. If you were to have his children, then surely none of them would become a holy maiden. God would never smile on such a union." Ayla stomped and turned toward her father, fists clenched at her sides. "I wasn't speaking of Ellis, father, and how dare you speak about him that way? I was referring to the woman you so insightly identified as the one I was with at the ball." Bishop Bartho punched the table so hard his drink bounced off and spilled onto the floor. "All of you, out!" he shouted as the young men, then waved to his servants to get them to leave as well. "I don't care what you have to say on the matter, father. I'm in love with this woman and I won't be controlled anymore." He rubbed his temples with his index fingers as if trying to fight off a quickly approaching headache. "My dear, sweet Ayla, my beautiful, wonderful daughter, let me explain something to you. You are special, unlike any other woman in the city, the world. Why do you think they sent these men to court you? You understand it's usually the other way around, don't you? Kingdoms all over the continent would trip over themselves to send their daughters for even 1 in 1,000 chance of being selected by one of them as their wife. One was a duke's son. A few of the others were princes. The one you were just speaking with, he is the youngest general ever selected in Estonia, and his father is the most highly decorated. He's not a wicked man either, as you yourself would admit. Don't you think he could learn to love someone like you and in time forget his previous lover? He shouldn't have to forget. The woman he loves should be good enough, she said, still angry, and for the first time in her life, holding her ground alone. You are the holy maiden. There are certain things you can get away with that no other woman could. Even more men of power could. If you want a female plaything, by all means have one and enjoy her in every depraved way you could come up with. Do it in secret. Or if you don't care about the controversy, do it in the open for all I care. You can have a harem of eager women if you'd like. You must have a husband above all of them. We are depending on you to bear the next holy maiden who can take your place. Don't you want to be free of this burden yourself? Bear many daughters, and one of them can take on the mantle. It's your duty to Arthurus and to the church, and a duty that can't be ignored. I mean, do you really think I actually loved your mother? Ayla was so angry now that she could hardly see straight. She only now realized it was because tears were clouding her eyes. She'd never known her mother, as she died giving birth to her. The stories that were told by the others who knew her made Ayla's heart break that she never knew her. For her father to say such a thing now, of all times, it was unforgivable. I don't suspect that you ever loved anything that wasn't your own reflection, Father, she said, making her way to the door. Don't you dare walk away from me. Your unruly behavior has gone unchecked for too long. You must stop behaving like a peasant. Doing as you please through your actions don't have any consequences for others. Whatever you say, she said, yanking over the door. Ayla, she warned again. She'd only turned toward him, tears running down her hot cheeks. She'd never been so angry in all her life, and she didn't feel like the way it felt. She ran out all the way out of the castle and grabbed the horse from the stables. Ellis was nearby and saw her. Hey, Ayla, is everything all right? He shouted, hurrying toward her. When she turned to face him, it upset him to see that she'd been crying. I'm leaving the city for a while, Ellis. I can't stand to be here even another moment. I'm so angry at Father, I just want to... She caught herself before she said what she really had on her mind. Instead, she just let out a loud, low growl. Okay, I'm coming with you, he said, grabbing a horse for himself. Don't, Father! My father would probably punish you for helping me. With all due respect, Ayla, I don't care about your father. I care about you, so I'm coming. She didn't feel like arguing with him. It was an argument he would win anyway. No matter how stubborn she felt at the moment, no one bested Ellis in a battle of stubbornness. As the two rode out of the city gates, he looked over at her. Let me guess, Stonefall? She nodded. Ellis sighed. Stonefall it is, then. That's the end of chapter 7. Whee! Sunny came back and now my nose itches again. He's a pain in the butt. Mr. Brogath came and brought me some warm tea. Keep my my throat all open and stuff. Good hot peppermint tea. I love peppermint tea. Best kind of tea there is. Alright, chapter 8 now. Once they arrived in Stonefall, Ellis helped Ayla down from the cart, and together they made their way toward Miria's home. Just like last time, Miria was out toiling in the garden, just as she was the first time they came. Upon seeing them, she threw down the rake in her hands and ran toward them. She and Ayla embraced, and Ayla surprised her with a kiss out in the open, where everyone could see. Miria didn't seem to mind. Undoubtedly, no one felt more awkward about it than Ellis, torn between being happy for the woman he cared about more than anyone, and feeling jealous that it turned out to be someone else who had captured her heart. Are you all right? You look like you've been crying, Miria said, brushing Ayla's hair away from her face. I have, but it's all right. I'm feeling much better now, Ayla replied. Hey, look, I need to pick up some grain from Longhammer's stables about 20 minutes down the road. I don't suppose the two of you would like to come. Having friends along for the ride probably would make the trip less boring. Ayla nodded enthusiastically. That does sound like fun. Would that be alright with you, Ellis? Ellis shrugged without answering. Ellis, are you alright? Ayla asked, speaking softly. Sure, I'm alright. Whatever you girls want to do, I'll obviously come. You don't need to ask. I like asking, Ellis. You're my friend. Ellis sighed, rubbing his arm. Why was he acting this way? And now, of all times, when Ayla needed his support. He was acting like a child and wasn't feeling proud of it. I know. Sorry. Just have a lot on my mind. Been staying up late every night training by myself. Just getting in my head, I guess. Ayla put her hand on his shoulder. You put so much of your heart in everything you do. Thank you. Ella smiled. All right, then. I know the way the long hammer, actually. Been a few years since I've been there. There's a really beautiful forest we'll be traveling through. Puts this one to shame. I'll even bet Miria will admit that. Miria nodded. You've got me there. That forest is a lot denser than this one, and the branches hang over the road from both sides. It's nearly dark when passing through it, even in the middle of the day. The people in these villages call it the night road. Ellis slapped his hands together. Got me missing it just talking about it. Just then he noticed that someone had been watching them from the corner of one of the homes. When he looked up, they retreated away from sight. He stared for a moment, waiting to see if they would reemerge. They didn't. Ellis, is everything all right? Did you see something? Miria asked. He wasn't about to let his paranoia ruin Ayla's much-deserved retreat. Besides, if any danger showed itself, he was sure he'd be prepared enough for it. No, nothing. Let's go. Once on the wagon, Ellis found himself increasingly nervous, made worse by the fact he was already nervous before they arrived. After Ayla and Miria shared a casual kiss, it left him feeling hurt and confused, and he wasn't sure how to express it. Or even if he should. No one deserves another's love just because they desired it. Love was not a game of entitlement. Besides, why couldn't he just appreciate how lucky he was to share a platonic love with her? Why couldn't he feel satisfied having her as his best friend in the world? The guilt ate at him, and it tore deeper into his heart. Miria was a great girl, as far as he could tell. Ayla was obviously crazy about her. What was wrong with him, anyway? He'd always been happy just to support Ayla's happiness, and that always made him happy. Why was now any different? Wow, it really is beautiful, Ayla exclaimed as they entered the forest, wrapping her arms around Miria and leaning her head on her shoulder. Even more so today, Miria said, clasping Ayla's hands in hers. Ellis watched them, and in that moment, he failed to be keenly alert as he normally would have been, and he paid for it with an arrow to the neck. He shouted out in pain, grabbing at his neck. The horses were spooked and charged off the road, toppling the wagon over, sending all three barreling into the mud. Ellis! Ayla screamed as she dragged herself toward him. I'm so sorry, Ayla. He was getting lightheaded. The arrow had cut his artery. Thinking quickly and jamming his finger into his neck was the only thing slowing it down. Well, hello, travelers, a voice shouted. A man emerged from the forest along with 4 others. Bandits, if you're here to rob us, take everything I have. Please don't hurt my friends, Miria said, untying the coin purse from her hip with the shaking hands as she cried. When she finally got it loose, she threw it toward him. Please, she pleaded again, don't make me. The man laughed. Your money? You think this is a robbery? Oh, we're after your cargo, all right, but it's not your money. We're Red Bear's men. Liars, Miria shouted. Red Bear would never send his men to attack innocent travelers like highwaymen. True, Red Bear didn't exactly authorize this, but I figure he'll forget us once he sees what we've brought him. Now step aside. We have no quarrel with you, girl. Please, don't make me. Please, I'm begging you. Miria pleaded again, on her hands and knees now. Just leave. Ayla cradled Ellis into her arms. She knew she should wait until the men were gone to heal him. If she revealed herself as the Holy Maiden, it would put them in danger even more grave than a mere robbery. These men would kill anyone accompanying her, but she couldn't let him die. He was losing blood and growing pale. If she waited much longer... Just let me die. Give nothing away, Ellis said, nearly whispering. Giving my life for you would be my privilege. His eyes slowly drifted closed. Ellis, hold on, just hold on. We can make it back to the village and they can save you there, I'm sure of it. How touching, the man said, drawing his sword. Turns out this villain has a heart after all. At least for his slaves. Now move aside, girl, or I'll have to assume Red Bear is wrong about you and you're a traitor all along. Ayla gripped Ellis's hand tightly, making a precise observation of his pulse. If it fell to a certain point, she could rip out the arrow and heal him in nearly an instant. Surprised, these bandits wouldn't have time to react before Ellis leaped into action and overwhelmed them with his swordsmanship. She knew he could. She'd seen him train. No one aside from her really knew what Ellis is capable of. Not even her father, Sir Blaine. Ready your arrows, men. Don't give her the chance to heal him or herself. What? They knew? How did they know? She betrayed us, Ellis said. No, you're wrong. She would never. Miria glared at him, but not blaming him for coming to that conclusion. Here she was again, being looked at with disdain and distrust by everyone around her. At least Ayla didn't believe it, for now. The four men raised their bows, knocking arrows and taking aim. Should have left us alone, Miria screamed, rising to her feet and putting herself between them. Ayla considered her next move. They already knew anyway. Now was the time to act. If she beat the arrows, she could heal Ellis in time for him to evade them. No matter how many she took herself, as long as none were instantly fatal, she could regenerate before it could kill her. She'd need his help to save Miria. Everything that happened next occurred with only a few seconds. She ripped the arrow from Ellis's neck and slammed her hand over the wound. A bright glow of light, warm and yellow as the rising sun emerged from her hands. Magical energy surrounded her. Blood gushed from Ellis's wound, but it was instantly closed. Ellis hadn't even had time to put his hand on his sword when the arrows were loosed. Miria waved her hands, and the arrows burst into flames, then ash. Her hair stood on end, and heat burst from her body as though everyone around her was standing near the open door of a giant furnace. With another wave, a wall of flame burst from her hand, the width of the road. The heat made it difficult to even breathe. Ellis and Ayla fell backwards, just as Ellis nearly made it to his feet. They could hardly believe what they were seeing. Before their very eyes, the flames disappeared. The black husks that were once the men before them stood stubbornly in the road for a moment, before collapsing to ash. Their armor had melted into a bubbling liquid iron on the ground, rapidly cooling in the shade of the trees. Not even their bones remained. No one made a sound. Miria turned around to make sure that they were safe, just in time to see the final white glow fade from Ayla's hand, healing Ellis's otherwise fatal wound. Ellis used his arm to maneuver Ayla behind him, drawing his sword and holding it out toward Miria. Just stay back. But I had to. Ayla, why are you? You're the Holy Maiden, aren't you? I had to. I'm not evil. I'm not, she said, tears running down her cheeks and falling to the ground below. I'm not. Why do you hate people like me? Why? I don't, Ayla whispered. I don't. I'm the last one left. The last one. I don't have anyone. I thought I finally did, but I don't. I'll always be alone, Miria said, collapsing to the ground, burying her face in her hands, sobbing loudly. Ayla, we have to go, now, Ellis demanded. Wait! She screamed as he threw on one horse and cut it loose from the wagon. He jumped on in front of her and shouted at the horse, sprinting full speed back toward the city. How could you leave her like that, Ellis? She screamed at him, grabbing him. Go back, right now! I'm commanding you! So you finally decide to give me a command, and the one time you do, I'm going to disobey it. Please forgive me. Where there are 5 of Red Bear's men, there are 50 more minutes away. Miria can take care of herself. It's not her safety I'm worried about, Ellis. Ellis, please, I have powers, but I'm a woman too. You almost died, but I saved you. Miria needs me too. Ellis lowered his head. I'm sorry, Ayla. Please forgive me. Yeah, spontaneous cat allergy. Awful. All right, that was the end of chapter 8. It is only 9 o'clock. Take a sip of my hot tea. Hopefully it's not too hot. Oh yeah, it's like the perfect temperature now. As long as I just like lightly sip on it. Warm tea is the best. Alright. Chapter 9. Ayla had finally calmed herself down enough to maintain appearance. Ellis let her know it would be at least a few hours until the next patrol came through and found the scene, and that hopefully they'd dismiss it as a robbery gone wrong. Miria would certainly be long gone. He'd left her with the horse, too. Not consciously, of course, though he let Ayla believe he had. He wasn't sure what to think. At first, he thought Miria had betrayed them and lured them there. But why kill the men who were about to kill them? With her power and no element of surprise for Ellis, he was no more a threat to her than a buzzing gnat. But she didn't attack them. But an actual witch. He knew he should report this. He knew it was his duty to protect Artharis from the threat of witches, and this was a witch beyond all doubt, not some innocent girl in the wrong place at the wrong time. Although Ellis was loyal to Ayla and cared for her deeply, he was loyal to the people as well and took his duty seriously. He couldn't decide. We should stick together for the rest of the day. I'll ride back and check on Miria tomorrow just to make sure she made it. I think she'll keep her secret. Exposing you will mean exposing herself, Ellis said, as they sat together, eating lunch on the edge of the training grounds. No, Ellis, it won't be to keep her own secret. It's because she cares about me. She saved your life, too, if you hadn't noticed. I couldn't have done anything at all if those arrows hit us at once. I can only heal wounds, not prevent them. If you or I were killed instantly, none of it would matter. Ellis opened his mouth to speak, but then she put her fingers over his lips. Second, consider what this means. Everything we heard and everything we were taught about witches comes into question. If they were all born heartless, soulless killers who eat babies for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, then how do you explain Miria? I don't know, Ellis said. I still love her, and I hope that you can accept that. I'm not turning her in, and I will not stop seeing her. Tomorrow, I'm going with you, and we are going to apologize for banning her on the road. Ellis sat quietly, playing in his food, no longer having the appetite to eat. Yeah. Sorry to have put you in this position, she said, sighing. I'm not even sure what position is, if I'm being truthful. Just a few weeks ago, I decided that witches probably never existed at all, and it was just a story made up by the church to scare people. Now, I wonder how much of it was true and how much they made up. What if a witch's power corrupts them or destroys part of their soul each time they use it? We just don't know. We don't find out by hurting someone just because we don't know. She doesn't deserve that. Several knights rushed up to put their training weapons as a high-ranking officer rushed into the training grounds. Evidence of a witch's attack was just found near Stonefall. The bishop has ordered a complete purging of all the women in that village, effective immediately. A small advanced force is written ahead to round them up, but you are to join them. There have been reports of rebel activity in the area as well, likely linked to the witch. We will investigate that while we're there. Yes, sir, the men shouted, quickly exiting the training grounds. Ellis snapped his attention to Ayla. Ayla, he said, pleading against what he knew he was about to suggest. We have to stop them, she said. Though she kept her voice down, the urgency was still there. I know how you feel, but you can't go. Even your father won't forgive you if you interfere. I know how you feel about her, but you have to think of your own life. The chances of you being able to convince them to stop are slim. I know it's hard, but you can't go. I am going, Ellis. Whether alone or with my only friend by my side is up to you. Ellis stood up, kicking over his chair. He paced to the side, running his hand through his hair. Should he stop her? He knew he should, but she would hate him for the rest of her life if he did. Besides that, how sure was he that stopping her was the right thing to do? What if she really could save the lives of all those innocent women in the village from a horrible death? What did innocent even mean anymore? He knew, for a fact, that Miria was a witch. But did she deserve to die because of it? I'm coming with you. You know I am. I'm hurt that you even doubted, he said. Although, for a moment, he even doubted himself. She grabbed him and hugged him tightly. Thank you, Ellis. He hugged her back, only briefly, before rushing to the stable with her to fetch the horses. The two of them bolted through the castle gates and made their way to Stonefall. They were just in time. Many women were already being tied to makeshift pillars hastily erected in the village square. Normally only one woman was tied per pillar. They were in such a rush that even as many as 4 were tied to each. Elderly women, even little girls. Don't miss anyone. Rip up the floor. Stab bales of hay. Do whatever it takes to make sure none of the witches escape. An officer shouted. When they came to a halt, Ayla didn't even wait for Ellis to help her from her horse. She jumped down and fell into the mud. Stop! She shouted, trying to look at the faces of the many women being tied up. No sign of Miria yet. She was surely among them. Where was she? Who are you? The decorated guard asked. Looks like we missed one, men. Tie her up. Ellis jumped between them, his hand on his sword. Fool! Do you not even recognize your own holy maiden? He growled. Holy maiden! The officer shouted, dropping to the ground on his hands and knees. While the other soldiers did the same. I'm sorry, I was caught up in the moment and failed to recognize you with the mud on your face. Please forgive me. Maybe this was going to work. Maybe she could save them after all. I demand you release these women immediately. They are without guilt. We can't just keep going around killing everyone anytime something bad happens near them. This isn't who we are. The officer rose to his feet and shook his head. Your father warned us you might try to do something like this. I'm sorry, Holy Maiden, but your father's orders take priority. Even if he wanted to obey you, we can't. These executions are to be carried out without fail and without delay. Men, continue the preparations. Ayla grabbed Ellis' sword from his hand and ran to the center, where the women were being arranged. I will kill myself if you raise one more pillar or even touch a single flame. Will my father forgive you then for allowing the Holy Maiden line to end forever? Will he commend you for following his orders despite my protest? Everyone froze in place for a moment, but the officer raised his hand to quiet the chattering of the knights. Continue as you were, men. She's bluffing. She doesn't have what it takes to end her own life. Besides, she can heal a simple cut like it's nothing. It's a trick. Just as the men moved again, Ayla dropped to her knees and stabbed the tip of the blade deep into her chest near her heart. What are you doing? Stop! The officer begged. You will learn how serious I am when it's too late. I will die before I see even one more innocent woman killed. I swear it. To God. To everyone. May my soul never ascend if my throat is empty, she screamed, gripping the blade tightly with small, trembling hands. Men, stop! In God's name, drop everything. Leave! All of you! Ayla screamed. The officer looked around for a moment, still trying to make sense of what he should do, but ultimately decided to comply with her request. As you wish. Men, we are leaving right now. We will report this to the bishop, Holy Maiden, what you've done here today. He will not be happy to hear it. Within a minute, all the knights had mounted their horses and rode back toward the city. Women cried and thanked Ayla. Untie them, Ellis. I have to check on something. You have really lost it, Ayla. What you just pulled, even I won't be able to protect you from the consequences, Ellis said, snatching his sword back from her. She walked over to him and grabbed his hand in hers. You've protected me more than enough to earn my gratitude for many lifetimes. You don't have to do it anymore. She let go of his hand and ran from the village into the woods, to the stream where she and Miria had sat before. As she approached, she found Miria sitting on the ground, hugging her knees to her chest. Miria! Ayla shouted, running toward her. I saw it all, what you did from the edge of the woods, but I was too scared to protect you. Afraid they'd catch me and kill me, or I'd make things worse. I just watched, Miria said, her cheeks wet with tears. Ayla clutched her own chest, a glowing light radiating from her hands, closing the wound she'd made with the sword, then wrapped her arms around Miria and hugged her from behind. I love you, and I'm so sorry you left you alone on the road. I'm so sorry you have to be afraid. So much of this is my fault, as the Holy Maiden. Miria shook her head. No, Ayla, don't you understand? I'm a witch. I'm the last one. It's because of me that these women have died. Did you know genuine witches can't be burned? Every woman they burned couldn't have been a witch. But even if they were, do I really deserve to die just because I was born? I'm so tired of this world. Tired of everything. And now, I've put you in danger. As long as I'm here, things will just keep happening that force me to use my powers. And you'll have to keep having to risk your own safety to save me. The only way I can protect you is if I leave. Ayla eyed the pack sitting on the ground next to them, and the horse tied only a few feet away. You mean to leave? Please don't. Miri rubbed her eyes and sobbed harder. You'll never be safe until I do. I don't belong here. Everyone hates me, hates who I am, what I am. Ayla grabbed her shoulders and forced her around. Didn't you hear me? I love you, Miria. Miria stood to her feet and shoved Ayla away. Just let me go, she said, backing away slowly. I have to do this. Please don't make it any harder. I won't let you go, Miria. I can't. Ayla took another step forward, but a small wall of flame stopped her as Miria waved her hand. I said get back, she growled before putting both hands over her mouth, gasping. Ayla was burned and fell backwards onto the ground with a yelp of pain. She held up her hands and forced a smile to reassure Miria that she was okay. No, see, this is nothing. See, look, I can heal it, she said. Her body glowed with a light for a moment, and the wounds were gone in an instant. It's okay. Look, I'm fine. Miriam shook her head and stumbled back, unable to speak. Without another word, she grabbed the pack, jumped on the horse, and rode away. Ayla ran after her for a moment until she was out of sight before collapsing on the ground, letting loose a flood of tears. "Please don't go," she whispered. And that's the end of chapter 9. I'll take another sip. Make sure my throat's nice and coated. We're taking a lot of hydration here. Should always hydrate well. Okay. Continuing on, chapter 10. We got like 4 more chapters and an epilogue to go. Once Ayla and Alice returned to the city, a full unit of the bishop's elite guard were waiting for them. They weren't aggressive. Instead, they offered to escort the two of them to make certain of their safe return. But they both knew what was really going on. The so-called escort was just a way of saving face for the people. Alice hoped against hope that it was a good sign that the bishop wasn't as angry as he expected him to be. No one, in the entire time he'd been in power, had ever defied him so openly like this. As an oppressive tyrant, he surely wouldn't take it well. Upon returning to the palace, Alice and Ayla were separated. They sent Ayla to the dungeon to await the bishop. Alice was sent to walk with Sir Blaine Grave. Of course, Alice hadn't been informed of the dungeon part just yet. Sir Blaine was likely to be there to prevent Alice from reacting too strongly and stepping above his station. Ayla endured the moans and groans of the surrounding prisoners from her cell. She could hear one man screaming since she'd arrived, and it made her uneasy. They bound her hands and feet to shackles that hung from the ceiling. The others were bolted to the floor. The screaming. Were they going to do this to her as well? Torture her until she complied? Vermin traveled across the floor freely, likely feasting upon whatever was down there. She's not known this prison was such a terrible place. How many others were unaware of the things happening down here? Before long, the fear she felt gave way to the anger and sadness. She always saw herself as a victim because of how little freedom she had growing up, how few choices she could make. All the while, she had it so easy. Seeing the pain Miria felt cut her through to the bone. She understood it, but while everyone wanted to control her, at least they hadn't wanted to kill her. Even if she didn't ask for it, people of the city loved her. She could be the holy maiden in public, without everyone deciding she needed to die. Then the ache bubbled to the surface again in her heart, thinking of Miria. Would she ever see her again? She had to accept the reality. She was gone, and she wasn't coming back. She waited for what seemed like forever, but was probably less than 5 minutes before the bishop arrived. He asked the guard outside her cell to leave so they could speak privately. "What do you have to say for yourself, Ayla?" Ayla stared him down, not breaking eye contact. She never hated him more than in this moment, after what he was about to do in Stonefall. What he seemed to be doing here in this dungeon. "I have nothing to say to you." "Sorry, are the screams bothering you? You'll be happy to hear that we've captured Red Bear and his men. We've already discovered the evidence that they planned to kill you, and now that the expected witch might help them achieve that goal. Do you understand the natures of the witches now? You're torturing them? Father, you've gone mad." He grabbed her chin, raising her face higher. "Me? Gone mad? You've been bewitched. Clearly you're under that woman's enchantment. You don't even know what you're saying. These witches are a threat to our authority, to our rule. How is it that you can't see that yet? And you're allowed so many of them to go free. By now they've fled to cause me trouble another day. With or without their folk hero Red Bear. They'll start using their fire magic in the open. And what then? Who will stop them? Pope no longer supports us because of Red Bear's propaganda, and we're murdering droves of innocent women. Witches! Innocent! The surrounding kingdoms will no longer commit to sending us aid because their own gates are being flooded with our refugees. No one appreciates that I am doing these difficult things to keep our people safe." "To keep yourself in power," Ayla corrected. "Your mother was just like you. Of all her sisters, she was the worst of the lot. Such an idealist just like you. To think that she, of all people, would be chosen to give birth to the Holy Maiden and to die before giving birth to more. All she had to do was give birth to children, and she couldn't even manage that. Everything to her was some kind of pity party. She had servants and riches at her disposal. What more could a woman want to be happy? You not You know nothing about women. Was mother bewitched too? He squeezed her chin roughly, sending a spike of pain through her face before letting go and pacing the length of her cell in front of her. No, because despite all of her shortcomings, and there were many, she still carried out her duty to give the city to the next holy maiden. You can't even be bothered to do even that. I've offered you every man in the city, and even invited suitors from afar. Yet none of them are worthy of your hand in marriage. None of them are worthy fathers of the future holy maiden. You're an unbelievably selfish girl. Me? Selfish? Ayla cried, despite trying her very best not to. I told you! My heart already belongs to someone. Now she's gone, and I'll never see her again. Wait! You say she's gone? Don't tell me. The mysterious witch that caused the scene on the road. It's that girl you were dancing with. Good. You have a way to make up for your insubordination. We can lure her back here and kill her. You announce that we have offered a chance for her to repent, to use her power for good and become a new holy maiden, a maiden of cleansing fire. When she arrives, we can kill her before she realizes we've set the trap. I would rather die, Ayla said. And what if we meant it and there was no trap? What then? That could work too. Imagine how much it would demoralize the other witches, knowing that such a powerful one of their own could join us to hunt them. With her power, she'd become our executioner, burning every witch personally, cleansing them with God's holy flame. Maybe then that coward Pope will reconsider. Your power can't be used for destruction. With the power we could threaten other kingdoms with, surely they would fall in line too. With the two of you as our symbols, perhaps we could even unite the continent under one banner, and our city could become the Empire's capital. She would never agree to it. Besides, nothing can make her come back. The bishop paced around the cell again, stroking his beard as he thought. Oh, I wouldn't be so sure of that. You're right. Likely she would never agree to join us. Even if she did, it would be too much of a liability. Having a weapon that powerful could turn on us would be far too great of a risk. Another ruler need only make the right offer, dangle the right carrot from a stick, and we'd become the victims destroyed by our own weapons. That much you're correct about, but you're not correct about everything. I believe there's one thing that will make her come back, if the love you share is strong as you claim. As the woman who is the symbol of the world's hatred toward her, I'm not so much that love remains in her heart now that she knows my identity, she lied. Bartho smiled. Nice try. I'm confident that if we announce your execution and have word spread to the furthest reaches of our territory and beyond quickly enough, then she'll return to offer herself in your stead. You wouldn't, Ayla shouted, never imagining he'd go this far. That's not even the best part. Your execution, Ellis can be the one to save you from it. There's only going to be one little, tiny task he'll need to complete. Why must you torment Ellis? He's been nothing but loyal to you. He's only stayed by my side to keep me safe, as is his duty. The bishop laughed. Oh, please. It's because his duty? The boy is in love with you. He would do anything for you, including kill a witch. Though he may not be the most skilled swordsman in the kingdom, since the honor belongs to Sir Blaine. He has, however, traveled with you and the witch. She'll likely think he's a friend and allow him to get close. He can strike her down before she has the chance to use any of her magic. Oh, and guess what his reward will be? Ayla hung her head. She was tired and knew her father's manipulative tricks too well. I'll tell you, Bartho continued, it's you. You are awful. Truly an awful man to toy with his heart this way. Ellis will never agree to forcing me. He cares too much for me, and he's far more heroic than a worm like you could ever imagine. There isn't an evil bone in his body. He will always do what's right. And saving you isn't right? Besides, who said anything about toying? Don't be so sure that he won't be willing to take what he wants. He is a man, after all, and surely you will forgive him in time. If you're going to bear children anyway, why not have it be the man who truly cares for you and would treat you well? Ellis will never stand for it. He grinned, patting her on the shoulder. Ellis is of common blood. This offer has never been an option for him. Previously, I would never consider allowing such a filthy bloodline to mix with the Holy Maiden. But these are special circumstances. With this path now in front of him, I'm afraid you're wrong if you think he will continue sacrificing his own desires to bring about yours forever. Eventually, the man will have no choice but to think of himself. And hurt me in the process? He would never. You and Alice are not the same. He shrugged. No matter. If he doesn't agree, then no one will save you and you will die as promised. The Holy Maiden has been the thread that's held this city together for over 200 years. They have all been obedient until you. Now, having you is worse than having no Holy Maiden at all. If you were to die, then so be it. Your own daughter! You would really kill me to preserve your power? She asked. She really wanted to know the answer. She never thought much of the man, but part of her always believed that some part of him saw her as his daughter and loved her at least a little. Would he really execute her? You were nothing more than a tool. If you thought differently, you think far too highly of yourself. Tools are meant to be replaced or disposed of when worn out. I see. Then I have nothing else to say, Ayla said, turning her head away. Oh, we'll see how long that sentiment remains. Pay attention. Things are about to get exciting for you, even if briefly. Farewell, my dear. Ponder on your sins while you wait. Calling back the guard, he walked away, and the cell of her door was slammed shut. The end of chapter 10. Get another sippy sip here. Ah, yes, the tea feels so good. Especially that one, changing the voices so much. Anybody else, before I start reading another chapter? Yeah, I'll catch up. But, anybody else have a favorite tea or warm drink they like to drink on, cold winter evenings? Chapter 11. Miria rode slowly as to not draw too much attention to herself. As she finally neared the border, everyone seemed to be in a panic, not paying much attention to the travelers passing through. In fact, it surprised her to find there was a line, and quite long. One at a time, a guard yelled from the gate. Even more arrived from behind her, quickly outpacing and passing her on the road. Could this really be because of the incident in the village? These unfair executions have been going on for the past couple of years, and even though there was a known exodus from the city's territory, it was never so many all at once. This is going to be terrible, she heard one woman say as she arrived at the end of the line. I know, it's good we acted early, but so many have also heard the news and rushed here. I feel they'll close the gates soon, the lady next to her replied. The bishop has really gone too far this time. Order is going to break down immediately. He must have really gone mad. Miria sighed. These witch hunts were likely going to worsen because of her, at least for a while. Now the bishop had a real, proven witch to stir up his paranoia, even more. At least by leaving, she could protect Ayla. And maybe, when enough time passes and no more witches emerge, the executions will slow. Bishop Bartho was still a fairly young man, so waiting for someone to replace him would be a grueling strategy. Even though the church no longer supported him, they hadn't renounced him or stripped him of his title either. One guard ran to the end of the line, followed by many soldiers who had just arrived. They carried a makeshift fence that they put down behind the family, about 10th in line behind Miria. Our kingdom would love to take you all in, but we cannot handle so many refugees all at once. Those behind this gate, please come back tomorrow when we've had more time to prepare. Miria felt a surge of relief that she'd made it in time to be let through, but the growing crowd became restless. It will be too late tomorrow, a man shouted from further back. He and his family were the first to be cut off by the fence. Once the Holy Maiden and Red Bear are executed, the rebel ranks will swell immediately. The whole territory could face a civil war. His wife elbowed him, clearly upset she'd offered so much information to the guards who may not have known the reason for all the new refugees. Miria's heart sank. This couldn't possibly be true. No way, it couldn't be possible. She ran away to protect Ayla. Next. Please ride through, the guard in front of her said warmly. She hadn't realized she was next in line. She turned her attention toward the man on the wagon. How do you know it isn't just a rumor? The bishop announced it, girl. There can be no doubt. He said she'd been bewitched and could no longer serve the church. He vowed to make the witches pay for compromising her purity. The executions are to increase tenfold. Miss, please, we must keep the line moving, the guard at the gate pleaded. Miria stood quietly for a moment. She thought she could prevent this. She thought she could stop the worst from happening. But no matter how many times or how hard she tried to avoid using her powers to harm others, something would force her hand. So be it. If they insisted on calling her evil for being born with this power and never allow her to be free, she would use it to punish evil instead. Tell your superiors to prepare for a potentially larger swell of refugees. These families at the gate, you must let them in. The situation is about to become more dire than you realize. The soldier took a hold of the reins of her horse. Things are unstable in the city right now, but people are just in a panic. You'll see. Many of these people will return home within a week. The bishop is likely just angry about what happened to the Holy Maiden. We don't have a Holy Maiden in our territory, after all, and we are perfectly stable. Arthurus will adjust, and surely he will not increase the executions. He's just grieving as a father. She swatted his hand away from her horse's reins. I'm talking about the witch that will attack the palace and rescue the Holy Maiden. The one who supposedly bewitched her. The guard slowly backed away. And how would you have come by such information? I am that witch, Miria said, holding out her hand and swirling a pillar of flame into the air. Everyone watched in silence. Miria waited for the rocks to fly at her, for the calls of her execution, for the children to run away screaming. We are behind you, Lady Witch, one woman hollered. The surprise was enough that she lost focus on the flame and let it go out. She looked around to see who had said it. Please save her, Lady Witch, another man shouted. A real witch, a little girl shouted, standing tall in the seat of the wagon next to her father. At first, he reached out to grab her and pulled her back, but after a moment, stood himself and shook his fist. Save our women from the mad bishop, Lady Witch! A moment later, she was swarmed by the crowd, not to turn her in, not to claw at her, curse her name, to offer her gifts. She was speechless. Through tears, all she could manage was a wave to everyone before rushing back toward the city. Meanwhile, Sir Blaine was called back inside by the bishop, who had just finished announcing the execution. Blaine and Ellis hadn't heard, and Blaine was none the wiser to his master's plans. He would be just as surprised as Ellis. As the two entered the throne room, the bishop smiled and waved them closer. The sounds of shouting could be heard outside, and the unrest was becoming clearer. Why are the people shouting outside? Blaine asked. Are we in danger? No, not at all. They will calm soon. Don't worry. I'm sure that my announcement of the Holy Maiden's execution is a shock to them, but they'll get over it. After all, a Holy Maiden is merely a tool of the ruler, not the requirement to rule. Ellis took a step forward, but Blaine held his arm in front of him. You should not offer this news to her guardian so callously, my lord. You owe him your reasons. He has served faithfully for 5 years as her sole protector. It's only natural to upset him. Not like you to reprimand me like this, Sir Blaine, but considering your loyalty and stellar service to our city, I value each word you say to me. Very well, I'll explain Ellis exactly how it is. Our Holy Maiden has been bewitched and can no longer serve our great city. As you know, I am her father, so it is a doubly heavy heart that I am put in the position to carry out such a burdensome but necessary act. Understand that I've shed many tears over it privately. Liar. Sorry, that was not in the text. As I know you will as well. Thank you for your service to her, and please don't blame yourself. After all, you are just a man, and no match for a witch. Don't be so sure, Ellis said, without even realizing why he just said the words. The bishop smiled. Oh, Ellis, I know you're upset. But even though killing the witch would break her spell over Ayla's heart, we dare not send anyone to perform such a task. I've heard the witch is gone anyway. The one sent to hunt her might meet the monster on the road, or just as likely to have to search in a faraway land for many years to come. He might die of old age before finding her if she is cowardly enough. After all, she succeeded in her goal of compromising the virtue of the Holy Maiden, so she has no reason to remain here. What if this was true? Alice couldn't help but think these thoughts. What if the men on the road were just a diversion so Alice wouldn't suspect her guilt? All along, her goal was to compromise her. That day in the market when she was in the mud trying to fix her wagon, had she known of Ayla's identity all along? Had she cast the spell then? But Ellis had thought her admirable himself, if he considered her honestly. She was beautiful and kind and full of gentleness and care, not unlike Ayla. Why not bewitch him too? Or had he been bewitched after all? There is no need for you to hide your knowledge of this witch. We know that witches look like regular girls. That's why we had to take the unfortunate stance of not taking our chances. Few innocent lives are a small price to pay to end these threats early. You couldn't have known the girl was a witch. It's my failure, really. I failed the Holy Maiden, and I failed as a father, he said, wiping a tear from his eye. Ellis could feel that something was wrong. He still didn't know what to believe, but something in his gut told him that there were lies all throughout his words. The bishop had never showed him fatherly care in the world for Ayla in all the time he'd known them. Why now? But if you'd truly be so brave so as to kill this witch and free Ayla from her spell, I would reward you beyond what any common man has ever received in this city. I will give you land, and you will be the first commoner with no parental connection to the church to receive the rank of knight. You will be a nobleman, which means one more very important thing. Here it comes. Whatever grand bargain the bishop was about to strike with him, this was going to be the big offer. It means you will be eligible to marry Ayla. I know that you've always loved her, and who better to love and protect her forever than her loyal guardian? Your daughters will be special, and I know you will be a better father than I ever was to Ayla. If you believe you are capable, then all you have to do is kill this witch for it all to be yours. You may think that Ayla will never forgive you, but when the spell has been broken, she should immediately return to her old self. Not immediately, then surely with time. What do you say? Ellis stood quietly, looking down at his feet. Everything he had ever dared to dream for in life was within his grasp. I'll take that as an agreement, then. Come, let us outfit you with the proper witch hunter's weapons and protections, the bishop said, as he began walking away. Sir Blaine put a hand on Ellis's shoulders as if to say he was happy for him. Blaine himself had not started in life easily and fought hard for his current fame over many years. After letting go, he followed behind the bishop. Ellis took one step and went no further. He'd decided. Even though it was everything he'd ever hoped for, it lacked the one thing that made it matter. Ayla's love, given to him freely, and his love for her was far too strong for him to be willing to take control of her like some object to possess. He reached down and began to draw his sword. Sir Blaine and Bishop Barthos snapped around, with Blaine holding up his hands. Boy, don't do it. You draw your blade in this sacred place, you can never undo the mistake. As is written in our tradition, I demand a trial by combat against anyone you choose. If I win, then God will have shown that the Holy Maiden is innocent and should be set free. If my opponent wins, I will do as you wish. I just have to know that it's right. The bishop laughed aloud, knowing just as well as Ellis what a silly and completely ceremonial tradition this was. Very well. Sir Blaine is here, so it'll be convenient to make him your opponent. Sir Blaine gripped his blade. My lord, you must take it seriously. Our honor binds us. Whoever wins must be declared right before the eyes of God, and you must honor the outcome. Fine, whatever you say. If he wins, I'll honor it. It'd certainly be enough of a miracle to warrant it. Begin whenever you're ready. Blaine and Ellis met in the center of the room and bowed to one another. Both drew their swords, just as Sir Blaine had done well over 100 times before, not counting his battles. No one had ever bested him, and Ellis had little hope of doing so today. That's the end of chapter 11. The throat coat tea that has slippery elm with some honey is probably my favorite. Yeah, I can't stand to drink that stuff. It's like the slippery elm and the flower that I cannot say, the echinacea thing. The coneflower. It's called coneflower. The common name is coneflower. I cannot stand that. I can't stand that tea. Anything warm helps me, though. Alright, so we've only got like we got 2 like chapters and an epilogue to do. I can't tell if I'm just like reading really fast or if like, I guess I'm reading at a good pace. It's about 3 hours. You know, keep taking breaks in between for like 30 seconds. Let me get another sip of my hot tea. Hopefully, you know, I can work on, you're reading a little faster than a typical audiobook narration speed, but I think the pace is good. Well, I mean, I'm trying to, like, I guess speed up the pace a little bit when there's, like, action to make it more exciting, but yeah. I could probably slow down a little bit more. Hopefully I'll be able to, get V-Bridger to work a little bit better with my mouth before Saturday. I really like how V-Bridger works. And I'm using the lip syncing now in Vtuber Studio, but I like the eye movements and stuff, and it makes more exaggerated movements and more fluid movements, I think. Alright. Chapter 12. Sir Blaine and Ellis stood in silence for several minutes. Though Ellis had no reputation to speak of, Sir Blaine took him seriously, approaching him with the respect of an accomplished warrior. Ellis had always known him to be a good and honorable man, and only a few short years ago he idolized him. Just as Sir Blaine had kept the bishop safe through many attempts on his life, Ellis wanted to do the same for Ayla. More than just his role as a bodyguard, Blaine Grave had answered the many dozens of challenges from knights from kingdoms near and far. At the height of these challenges, he took part in over 20 bouts in 1 year, each time only walking away with minor injuries, often none. When Ellis was granted the role of guardian of the Holy Maiden, Sir Blaine was the knight who tested him. After that, Ellis endured insults from all the other knights daily, referencing his low birth. That he should stop playing at being a knight. He was spat on, had things thrown at him, and worse, until he finally stopped trying to train with others. After all he needed was Ayla's company. It's a shame Sir Blaine put duty so far above everything else that he couldn't see through the bishop's true intentions. He wasted his strength and loyalty on a man like Bartho. Taking a step forward in perfect form, Blaine looked to end the confrontation quickly, in a single blow if possible. Ellis parried the strike, pivoting and nearly landing a reversal before Blaine could retreat back another step. Blaine was unfazed, but the bishop was panicked. He stood up from his throne and retreated further back to the other side of the room near the door. Ellis took the initiative this time, swinging the sword in a downward diagonal arc before twisting his hips and bending a knee to change its direction. A man with less strength could have never corrected their block in time, but Sir Blaine was far from ordinary. With ease, he mirrored Ellis's movements and deflected the strike, following up by swinging a horizontal strike toward his torso. Ellis ducked under it, threw himself forward, and caught Blaine with a shoulder to the chest. With a pivot, Blaine wrapped his arm around Ellis's neck, flinging him to the floor. Instead of falling flat, Ellis spun on his knee, slicing the cloth on Blaine's pant leg. Although it was inappropriate given the contest, this made Blaine smile. For a view they've been hiding you, boy, in plain sight, this is one of the most skilled maneuvers I've ever witnessed. Yield, and I will see to your cultivation as a knight personally. Potential like yours to have become so skilled training alone is a tragedy to be wasted, or worse yet, to perish here along with you. Thank you for your kindness, Sir Blaine, but we must see the trial through. I must know who God will support. Sir Blaine nodded slowly, fighting the smile. Spoken like a true warrior of uncompromised virtue. Let's continue, then. He changed his stance, holding the sword above his head. Ellis was familiar with the stance, however. He read about it in an eyewitness account of a duel where Blaine had used it. Just as described, the offensive strike came swift and strong. Ellis could only block it, causing his feet to slide back. He pushed against it, but was nearly overwhelmed by the momentum combined with Blaine's unbelievable strength. Shouting and calling on every fiber of muscle in his body, he allowed himself to be pushed down to nearly a knee before springing up and shifting the momentum to his own favor. When Blaine was off balance, Ellis followed up quickly with a kick to his chest. It landed, but Blaine took advantage of his opponent now losing his own balance and threw out a quick, light thrust toward Ellis's chest. Ellis responded with a thrust of his own, the tip of his sword slamming into the guard of Blaine's sword, preventing it from piercing further. Still, the tip of the blade had broken the skin and Ellis was bleeding. Just finish him, Sir Blaine! Stop toying with him! The bishop shouted. My reputation is at stake here. This is not a game. Sorry if it appears a game to you, and forgive my boldness in saying this, but my opponent is more skilled than you would understand as someone who is not a warrior. Must be cautious and careful, or I may not win this fight. You, the undefeated duelist, your words hide the fact that you have betrayed me. You're siding with Ayla and this boy. This is all a ruse designed to make me agree to the trial thinking you were loyal to me. Traitor! My lord, Blaine shouted, completely taken aback by what he just heard. Not hesitating to seize the moment, Ellis erupted forward, swinging his blade with all his might. Blaine had seen it midway through, but not from the start, and he was too late to block. The blade impacted his torso and sent him toppling to the ground, clutching his chest and rolling onto his stomach, gasping for air. "I've won!" Ellis shouted at the bishop. "Now honor the trial. Release the holy maiden and beg God to forgive your wrongs." "You cheated! He was distracted! Distracted by you! It was not my doing! Honor the agreement!" The door behind the bishop flung open and 2 guards ran inside. At first they looked at Blaine and Ellis, unable to make sense of what they were seeing, but it was obviously other urgent matters had priority. "Bishop Bartha, the witch is here, and she's burned through our main gate in an instant. She's making her way to the castle. You must retreat further inward." "Honor the agreement! Let her go!" Ellis shouted again. "Never!" the bishop hissed, running toward the door. Ellis flipped his sword in his grip and flung it like a spear toward the bishop just as he closed the wooden door between him. It slammed into the wood and stuck there. Ellis retrieved his sword from the door. "You turned your blade sideways at the last second. Why did you spare me?" Blaine asked as Ellis made his way toward the front of the castle. "Consider it my invitation to continue this another day, Sir Blaine," he said with a smile. Blaine wheezed a laugh, and Ellis ran toward the door. Meanwhile, Miria walked slowly through the streets, studying her surroundings, as careful as she could be not to harm any innocent people. Her power was strong, but too strong to be focused easily. Such raw, destructive energy came at a great price. To throw out a flame towards someone in the distance meant burning everything in between. Fighting in a city was not ideal, but they quickly evacuated everyone. The streets were becoming less crowded, even more reason to take things slowly. No one had directly challenged her. Every guard she encountered retreated further and further back, slamming down security barriers at each section of the city. However, it only took her moments to burn through them. They went up like dry leaves against her power. "Give me the Holy Maiden!" she shouted. No one could hear her yet who could understand that demand, but she wanted everyone to hear her all the same. Something about using her power like this was changing inside of her. She no longer felt scared or even reluctant to use it. In fact, it had called out to her, like a voice that had laid dormant in her mind. She felt the urge to kill. She hoped for resistance so she could burn them to ash. This feeling was frightening at first, but she was accepting it as a good thing. The last thing she needed to do was hesitate in saving Ayla. As she neared the inner city gate, she saw 2 of the guards above holding hammers. Once they saw her coming, they counted, then hit the wooden blocks at their feet, allowing a hulking wall of iron to fall down into the space where the door was. The bishop had time to prepare for her arrival, it seemed, and it must have taken months to create this door. He'd been preparing for a witch's attack all along, and this likely wasn't the last surprise she'd encounter. The guards all charged at her as the 2 on the wall pulled out bows and began firing. She radiated flame from her body. It felt like instinct. Even though it burned her clothes away, she didn't feel any embarrassment or fear. The flames covered her like a suit of red armor, and no one could see her body beneath it. She felt only excitement and eagerness to use more of her power. All these years of bottling it up, hiding it, being afraid of it, all wasted. She'd never know how beautiful it was, how good it would have felt to use it so freely. She knew now. The arrows melted and burned before the molten metal of the arrowhead slid harmlessly off her bare skin, dripping onto the ground and billowing smoke as the air cooled it. The blades of the soldiers did the same, and coming into striking distance of her gave them terrible burns. Even her walk was different now, and she caught herself smiling. She was like a beautiful goddess walking into a den of mortals, foolishly believing they could challenge her divine power. Perhaps she could be a symbol after all. No, she was more than that. Far more powerful. She approached the door. Once there was no longer anyone willing or able to attack her, she poured flame onto the door, and at first it held strong. Smiling, she used both hands to pour even more flame. The door heated to a bright red at first, then white. Frustrated by the lost time, not knowing if she could spare to save Ayla, this nuisance only stoked her rage. Her flames grew hotter and hotter till the door warped and sagged. One last scream of fury, the door collapsed into a river of molten liquid puddling on the ground. Miria waded it through it like a child splashing through a puddle after a heavy rain, without a care in the world. A thick wall of archers lined the top of the castle wall, and heavily armored knights waited in a row at the bottom, placing themselves between her and the door. She was clearly in the right place. So many have come out to play, she said, smiling and placing her hand on her hip, taking a few steps forward. Give me the holy maiden, or I will spare not one life. The end of chapter 12. I never made it clear in the book, but Bartho called it. Blaine totally threw the duel to help Ayla. Yeah, that's not very clear. I kind of figured that, well, I could see that Blaine threw it, knowing, like, Blaine further on in the story. But, like, I kind of just figured that Ellis was also pretty strong. Especially after the bishop was like, he's like, I guess you could probably guess in the later books, seeing how capable Blaine actually is. Yeah. Yeah, Blaine does a lot of shit in the later books. If you don't want to wait in between narration streams, you guys should definitely read it. Blaine one day should have his own spin-off series. Okay, we've got one more chapter and an epilogue. Ayla struggled against her chains to no avail. She thought to rip her hands from them if she needed to and simply heal the wounds, but they'd planned for that. The bands were far too tight to pull through. Even if she broke her wrists completely, she'd never get through them. A bored guard sat outside her cell, tossing up the key and catching it. Not once had he looked up at her. What's your name? She asked him. He ignored her. It looks like you may be the last person I ever speak to in this life. Won't you please tell me your name? He caught the key and sighed, still unable to look at her. Charles, Holy Maiden. So you know who I am. Have we met before? She asked. This man was her only chance of getting out of this cell. She prayed she could somehow get through to him. Once, at the execution ceremony a few days ago, here in the inner city. I'm a commoner, so I can't be a knight, but I can at least be a guard for the castle's dungeon. Could I ever convince you to let me go? She asked. After what you've done to our city? No. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't anyway. Doing so would be a death sentence. No one has ever escaped from this dungeon. Do you know why? Ayla shook her head, remembering the screams from earlier. I'm not sure I want to. He laughed. It's because no one ever makes it here. The bishop is so bloodthirsty that in all the years I've worked here, the cells have never been full. Despite hundreds of witch executions and a full-on rebellion going on, we've never filled all the cells. There are only 12. If you think the executions were bad, I'm sure you're learning that this place is nothing more than a glorified torture chamber. The bishop means to torture me? The Charles smiled and shook his head. No, please don't worry. A lot of torturing has taken place in this cell, but he simply wants to make sure you don't cause trouble for him while the execution is being prepared. You can't just be burned at the stake. Not only would it be cruel, but it probably wouldn't work. You and the Red Bear are getting the old-fashioned treatment. The guillotine. Problem is, we haven't used it in quite a while, and it's not in great order. We're having it restored. Do you have a family, Charles? Funny you ask. My brother is a witch hunter. Similar to the knights, but not some decoration like most of those fools. Real, cold-blooded warriors who studied witch magic lore in secret and know just how to attack them. Metallurgy has advanced a lot in the past 200 years. If your witch friend comes, maybe we'll get to see them in action. I've seen a witch in action, Ayla said, hoping to keep his attention. Really? What was it like? Your brother and these witch hunters don't stand a chance, not even a little. I was only nearby. Without my power, Ellis and I would be dead. Charles was quiet for a moment. You're exaggerating, he said, forcing a grin. She didn't even mean to, you see. She can't even use her power without destroying everything around her. Your brother, God rest his soul, is being sent to his death to satisfy my father's delusion that he can keep this going forever. It was fine when all the women were innocent, wasn't it? When you could just round them up and ignore their screams? I learned something else recently that I'll share with you. Did you know true witches can't be burned? Think about it. If they could, their own power would destroy them. Every single one of the women you helped kill was innocent. Charles dropped the key on the table and finally met her eyes. You lie. If all those women were innocent, that would mean... A figure came around the corner and slammed a heavy bucket down on Charles's head, knocking him out cold. Is he out? The man said. Hurry. Tell me, did that do it? Ayla could barely look at the man. It was almost unbelievable to her that he was still alive. His screams must have been the ones she'd heard earlier. They'd been torturing him for no telling how long. His injuries were horrific. He's unconscious, he said, looking away. I can't stay awake much longer. Where's the key? He asked. She could barely understand him. She had to concentrate to make out what he was saying. In that moment, she realized that the time for looking away was long over. She needed to see him, see everything. Everything her father had done, she had turned a blind eye to all these years. She would look at it and make it right. On the table, near his head where you hit him with the bucket. It's between you and him. He felt around with his one good hand. He was missing the fingers off the other one. Likely, her arrival had distracted them from finishing the job. The bishop probably didn't want to be interrupted by screaming while he interrogated her. He picked up the key and stumbled toward her cell and placed his hand against the bar. 7 bars to your left, a few inches up from where your hand is now. He followed carefully and unlocked the door. Originally, I came to kill you. That was my mission. I overheard your conversation with your father and then with the guard just now. I'm glad I didn't find you before. Ayla shuddered, not sure whether to be afraid or thankful he had a change of heart. He collapsed to his knees. I'm sorry. I can't. One hand. You only need to free one hand. He dragged himself over to her and clutched at her leg. Forgive me for being inappropriate, he said, pulling himself back to his knees and then wrapping his arm around her waist to help steady himself. Please don't think about that. Just follow my arm to my wrist. The same key unlocks the shackle. He was wheezing now, the sound a man makes when he's taking his final breaths. That he could still move was a miracle. He did not look like someone who should be alive. He stretched up his arm and brushed against the shackle. Try again, she shouted. On his next attempt, he wrapped his injured arm around her tightly, and the key found its mark, unbinding the shackle. Just as it did, he let go and slumped to the ground. She snapped her hand down to catch him just before he fell out of reach. She concentrated. This would be difficult with such extensive injuries. Her hand glowed, and the man cried out in pain. Soon he could see again, and he watched in awe as all of his injuries disappeared. His fingers regrew, even his hair. He stood, bent down, and kissed her on the cheek. Forgive me for being inappropriate one last time, my dear, though I have no excuse for that one. Thank you for saving my life, but I will have to trouble you to save many more. My men will no doubt come for me. If I don't find a way to speak to them first to rescind the order, they will target you. I give you my word that I will not let that happen. As he rushed to undo the rest of her bindings, she studied his features. A tall, muscular man with red hair. He spoke of his men. This was Red Bear. I've spent many years fearing you, I suppose for good reason. Now I suspect we're not so much different from one another, she said. No, I suspect we're not, he agreed. They heard a crash as men burst into the dungeon. The witch is attacking! She's breaching the walls! The Holy Maiden's guardian has betrayed us too and tried to assassinate the bishop. No one knows where he's gone. A brief silence followed. Where is everyone? Have they been moved already? Red Bear held a finger to his lips. Finally picked up the sword off the guard he knocked unconscious and hid himself around the corner. When the 2 knights stepped around the corner, he ambushed them, cutting them down before they realized what was happening. Ayla covered her mouth, not ready to see 2 knights from her own city killed before her eyes. She was resolute. She'd promised herself she wouldn't look away, and so she didn't. She grabbed one of their swords. The way is open. And by the way, what should I call you? I've decided I like you, but I hate calling you Holy Maiden. Ayla, just call me Ayla, please. I would be just as happy if no one called me Holy Maiden ever again. He smiled. Follow me, Ayla. I will get you out of here alive. The 2 of them rushed to the door and met 3 more knights as they emerged. One stabbed Ayla, gripping the sword and pulling the knight in close, stabbing him through the chest. She pulled the sword out and healed her wound, flinching. Red Bear had already taken care of the other 2. There's a handy power, but it's nothing like a witch's. There's something you should know once we escape. And that is, the woman you think loves you, she may not be herself anymore. Ayla grabbed his arm, turning him around to face her. Please speak. Speak clearly. I never got the chance to teach her about what it truly meant to be a witch. When witches trained, it wasn't to improve their power. It was to increase their willpower and discipline. The power is linked to emotions in both directions. Rage and bloodlust can cause the power to increase, but the reverse is also true. Using the power too much in a short time can cause a person to lose all self-control, to change, to become rage and bloodlust incarnate. In the early days, many witches just went mad. I just want you to be prepared for what you might see. I will save Miriam no matter what. And if you can't, he asked. If I can't save her, it will be up to you. I will die trying. You really love her, don't you? He said, resting his hand on her shoulder. What's so wrong about you? Then help me save her. We don't have a moment to lose. That was the end of chapter 13. We got one more chapter to go, plus the epilogue. Well, they should get the deluxe edition anyway. It has your art in it. That's true. There's what, like 17 art by me? And then there's the few by that is actually in the first book by on Taba, who does all of the covers. And yes, the link in the pinned comment. There are 2, I think. 16 watercolors by you, 1 group art, and 8 cover illustrations by Taba. Can't believe that I did like 17 illustrations in like 2 weeks though. Oh, and 3 black and white internal illustrations by Taba too. Yeah, that's what I mentioned. Because they're, yeah, for the first book. Because they're in this book. So the first book is the only book that has, aside from the deluxe edition, the whole like series book, whatever, the complete edition. The first one is the only one to have internal illustrations, because that was all we could afford. For the first book, yeah. Alright, chapter 14, last chapter. Then the epilogue. Miria bent down and picked up a rock, twirling her hair with the other hand. She smiled and looked up at the arches above. With a swift throw, the rock glided through the air and slammed into the wall, causing an explosion, sending several of the arches flying in all different directions. What's the matter? Burning me suddenly doesn't feel like such a good idea anymore. Go ahead, fetch your kindling and erect your pillars. Don't you want to see what fire does to a proper witch? 3 of the ground guards rushed toward her. She threw a flame at them. Initially, it didn't melt their armor. However, the heat was still enough to kill the men inside in only moments. The remaining archers fired on her all at once, and their arrows pierced her body before she could melt them. Staggering back, she grabbed the arrows and pulled them out, burning the wounds closed. Clever trick. A heat-resistant metal, I see. You're still nothing to me. Bring me the Holy Maiden. Another volley fired at her. An arrow pierced her shoulder, chest, and side. She dropped to one knee. Hold your fire, she heard a voice say as a man exited the castle doors. There was Bishop Barthel. It's a shame we didn't even need to employ the witch hunters. The special arrows were enough. I suppose you're not so great compared to your sisters from history. Bring me the Holy Maiden, she repeated. Set her free. Oh, I'm sorry, my dear, but I'm afraid this love story will be a tragedy. Her execution was meant to lure you to exactly the place you are standing now. And once you are dead, I will kill her anyway. I can't afford the liability anymore. Please let her go, Miria pleaded. He smiled. No, things are going to change around here. For too long I've been too easy on you witches. From now on you will die by... The blade of a sword emerging from his chest erupted his speech. His eyes went wide and he grabbed the blade, dropping to one knee. Ella stood above him, withdrawing the blade and grabbing him by the hair. Kill her, the bishop said. Though those would be his last words, Elish plunged his sword into his neck, deep down into his chest. He withdrew the blade again and kicked the bishop forward, dead. Stunned silence fell over the crowd. Ellis, you're helping me? Miria asked. The fight isn't over, he shouted. To your feet, Miria. I may not kill them all myself, but I'll try. From behind Miria, several men emerged with lighter armor, polished to a mirror finish, crossbows slung over their backs, and gleaming blades in their dominant hands. These were the witch hunters. Miria turned to face them, but several bolts fired from the crossbows penetrated through her flames. She fell to her knees, but only stayed there for a moment. She growled and rose to her feet again. The flames from her body increased to such a heat that Ellis could no longer fight close to her. He fled to the wall to keep from being cooked alive. The heavier armored men he was about to engage tried to follow, but were too slow. They died in their armor without ever attacking. "On your knees, and I may spare your lives," Miria shouted, her smile returning. One man ran at her with his sword aimed true. She waved her arm, and his molten armor splashed onto the men behind him. All that was left of him was black dust that scattered to the wind. Her flame's heat had increased beyond anything even the special metal could resist. From behind them, more men emerged, dressed differently than the others. They immediately engaged the witch hunters, ambushing them from behind. "We're here to support you, Great Witch. We're here to help you save Red Bear." Miria turned and set a whip of flame toward the archers still on the wall. Even as she could feel her life force leaving, her rage and her power only increased. The heat now was almost too much for anyone to bear in the courtyard. Ellis was pouring sweat all the way on the opposite end, but he could retreat no further. Suddenly, Ayla emerged from the castle. "It's the Holy Maiden! Kill her quickly!" one man shouted. Miria collapsed to her knees, trying to raise her arm, but failing. Her flame had closed her wounds, but the damage from multiple arrows was too severe. "Do not obey that order!" Red Bear screamed as he emerged close behind her. "Do not harm this girl if you are loyal to the true ruler of this city. You will trust my order, and I'll explain later. No one dare shoot!" The men all looked at one another confused, but obeyed all the same while keeping their distance. "Ayla, I'm so glad you're all right," Miria said. "I'm sorry that I hurt you before." "Dissipate your flames. There are no more enemies to fight," Ayla said. "I must treat you." I can't. I don't know how to stop them. I'll be dead soon. It's enough that you're okay. I'm just so angry. They were going to kill you. I love you. I hate them for all trying to take you away from me. They deserve to die. All of them do." "No, no one else needs to die, Miria. Not you either. Please calm yourself before your power destroys the you I love." "I can't," Miria said, shaking her head. "I'm sorry. In the end, there was more hate than love inside me. I was just evil after all." She slumped to her hands and knees. "Just let me die without hurting you again, please." Ayla ran toward her, fighting through the heat until the burns came. She was still so far away. "Don't! Please don't! You'll die!" Miria pleaded. Ayla continued forward, her fists clenched. Her body glowed with a brilliant light. As soon as the burns appeared, they stopped progressing. She was so far away still. "I would rather die than hurt you, Ayla. Please don't make my life count for nothing." Ayla took several more steps forward. The burns worsened again. She breathed in deep and shouted, "No!" Reaching deep down, she focused on her love, her desire to heal and to protect. She fought back the anger she felt. Miria's desperation only made her flames burn hotter. "Ayla, no! I will hate myself so much if I kill you. I'll never rest in peace." Ayla took several more steps as she could feel her injuries becoming more and more severe. A few minutes longer and she would be dead, no matter how much power she summoned to fight against them. If I could just heal those wounds and save her, she thought, then that would be enough. Finally, she reached her. Ayla held out her hand and placed it over the wound in Miria's chest, then the one on her side. One by one, she healed them. By focusing on Miria, the power holding her own wounds at bay weakened, and she could barely stay conscious. "Just a little more. This is my gift to you, my love. Please live on. Please live a good life for me. Don't blame yourself for my choice." Miria wrapped her arms around Ayla as the last of her wounds healed. She could feel Ayla's life leaving her body as fire overwhelmed the power to heal. Miria carried out, screaming with all her soul, weeping so hard that she could only choke on the tears. She took a deep breath. "Please don't go, Ayla." Her grief overwhelmed her anger and hatred until she could feel nothing else. She closed her eyes and hugged Ayla's body tightly as her arms fell limp into her side and Ayla's head fell against her chest. She continued to hug her. I love you, Ayla. Opening her eyes, she thought at first she couldn't see because of the tears. Soon she realized it was because of the blinding light in front of her. Ayla raised her arms again, returning her embrace. I love you too, Miria. I love you so much. Ayla, she screamed. Now she could only smile as the two hugged each other tightly. Her body felt calm and cool in her arms, like she didn't have a worry in the world. Like all the events of the day had been erased. Against all odds, they had both survived. Ellis approached them and removed his coat, placing it around them to hide them from being exposed, all their clothes having been burned away. He looked to Red Bear. What now? Do you intend to use Ayla and Miria as symbols or weapons? Answer me truly so I'll know whether I should kill you where you stand. I will never allow it. Red Bear sighed. Please, call me Nigel. Nigel Artharis. And no, I will tell you the truth. My original plan was to assassinate the Holy Maiden and to install the Great Witch in her place. Now, having seen what kind of thinking that created for myself, is the furthest thing from what I want to do. Besides, I could never have imagined what kind, caring woman Ayla was. To love a witch who was born to hate, who she was the very symbol against. Her courage to be true to herself has inspired me to do the same. He stepped forward, addressing his men. From this day forward, there will be peace in Artharis. We will not seek retribution against this church, nor the faithful who live within these walls and the surrounding villages. We will forgive them and show them the love that we have been shown here today by these two young girls. Witches will be allowed to train in their covenants again, should more emerge. More women are born who possess holy magic. We will accept them just the same. The two magics can exist in harmony. As you can see, the rumor that the Holy Maiden would die if she healed a witch was as false as so many of the others. Her love only strengthened her power, just as the witch's passion and desire to save Ayla only strengthened hers. Every year we will hold a festival to celebrate their bond, and I will call it the Festival of Light and Flame. Ayla sheathed the sword and bowed to Ayla and Miria. It has been my pleasure serving you, my lady, but that service ends today. Miria, please master your power and take good care of her in my stead. With you there is no need for me anymore. Ayla opened her mouth to protest, but she understood. Then I release you honorably from my service, Ellis Brindle. Ellis smiled and turned to relieve. Since you're a free agent now, I don't suppose I could interest you in being the captain of my guard, Nigel asked, grinning. Ellis stopped and considered it for a moment. I will think about it. Nigel nodded, slapping him on the shoulder. Good enough! Mary and Ayla looked into one another's eyes and kissed, neither of them ever wanting to let the other go. Now we're at the epilogue. So 28 illustrations total. Took me a second to do the basic math. Basic math is hard. It's hard. While I read this last bit, I should decide who to raid. There is like so many people on today. Maybe it's just Thursdays. It's been so I've never, to be fair, I haven't really streamed on a Thursday because well, except for like a couple weeks ago, but usually I have Taekwondo and I'm not usually home till long after 7. So that would mean that I would only be able to stream for a couple hours. I mean, would probably be alright. Alright. Let us finish this epilogue. Oh, I picked up my book upside down. Alright, there we go. That was disorienting. Epilogue. 1 year later. Miria pulled the pillow over her head, trying her best to ignore Ayla's pleas. 5 more minutes. No, not 5 more minutes. We're going to be late as it is, Ayla said, grabbing her pillow and trying to pull it away. Miria fought back, yanking the pillow, causing Ayla to fall on the bed on top of her. The two looked at one another for a moment before both smiled. Ayla kissed her quickly and jumped to her feet again. I mean it. We're going to be late to our own ceremony. Doesn't that embarrass you at least a little? Ayla asked, crossing her arms. No, Miria said, pulling the covers over her head. Ayla sighed and shrugged. I guess I will get someone else to help me into my dress then. Miria pulled down the covers and stared at her for a moment. That's my job. Not if you don't show up for it. Miria threw the covers off and slowly eased herself out of bed. Fine. Once the two of them were finally dressed in their formal gowns, They ran toward the festival grounds, hoping the people in attendance weren't too angry for them for showing up late to the road ceremony. Sorry, everyone. Seems our lovebirds forgot where the palace courtyard is, even though one of them lived here and the other burned it to the ground last year, Nigel said, pacing back and forth, mumbling to himself. Ayla waved at Nigel as they approached, gasping for air. Sorry we're late. It's all right. It's only hundreds of people waiting 15 minutes for you to lead the ceremonial first dance in your honor. I mean, no big deal, right? Well, you're the mayor, after all. Even after you held an election, you still won it anyway. Can't you start the first dance with that new lady friend of yours? Miria teased. Are you still missing the part where this festival honors the two of you and not me? Stop teasing him, Miria, Ayla said, elbowing Miria and smiling. Of course, you can begin the song anytime. Miria only stepped on my toes 4 times last night when we rehearsed it, so I think we're more than ready. 3, Miria said, blushing. Nigel smiled and signaling with a wave for the band to play. Now, everyone, grab your partner as Ayla and Miria lead us into the opening dance for the first annual Festival of Light and Flame. Everyone cheered and the sound of music filled the air. Ellis sat at the edge of the courtyard, smiling as he watched the two. He was officially off duty for today, the festival, but still intended to monitor everything all the same. His role as guard captain suited him well. A lazy job in a peaceful city, but still an excuse to train with a sword. Sir Blaine had officially endorsed his nomination, having retired himself to wander. The two had their rematch, and it had ended in a draw, which certainly didn't satisfy Sir Blaine. Though Ellis had the sneaking suspicion he took it easy on him this time. With a hug and a fond farewell, he had ventured out onto the road to learn from masters across all the bordering kingdoms. A job that held him in one place was never good for the man. No telling how skilled he would have been by now if not for that. As he sat contemplating the past year, a rose passed in front of his face. It was the flower vendor from the market, a brown-haired girl slightly older than him. Aren't you supposed to be off duty today, Captain? Ellis nodded. Technically, I am. Just needed an excuse to be here, I guess, to keep an eye on things. Would it be all right if you were my excuse to be here today? Your patrols passed by my stalls for nearly the full year, and you always compliment my flowers. I never wanted to interrupt you while you were working, and since you're always working... Ellis smiled as he listened. Well, today's the first chance I've given... Well, today's the first chance I've had to give you one of them. Ellis took the rose and breathed in the smell. It was wonderful. He'd always appreciated flowers, but never for the way they looked. He always enjoyed the way they smelled, and said so to her months ago. She must have remembered this, as the rose was especially fragrant. Well, I'll be going now. Like you, I'm not working today, but I like to keep myself busy, she said, turning to leave. He reached out and caught her arm. Before I have a dance? Her face lit up, and she smiled so hard, Ellis wondered if a smile that big would hurt. Ellis, Brindle, I thought you weren't going to ask, she said, offering her arm. He took it, and the two danced, smiling nervously at one another the entire time. Both were much better dancers than the other expected, thankfully. Ayla spotted them across the courtyard and pointed them out to Miria, unable to restrain their own smiles. I'm so happy seeing him that way, Ayla said. Me too, Miria agreed. Now all of my rivals have been defeated, though more are bound to show themselves. Oh, you, Ayla said, waving her finger. When the music stopped playing, Miria grabbed her arm. What do you say the two of us ditch the next one and go for a ride? Ayla sighed, but nodded in agreement. You're hopeless. Just one song? Sure. They only asked for us to stay for one, right? Ayla frowned. I suppose. Miria led her away from the courtyard and to the stables to collect their horses. Together, the two rode until they were into the woods next to Stonefall. The two dismounted and sat on the ground beside the stream. I got these cookies for you, Miria said, producing a small pouch from a pocket in her dress and handing to Ayla. Oh, thank you. Would you enjoy them with me? Ayla asked, untying the bag and holding the open end toward Miria. Sure, but first, there's something sweeter I'd like to taste. Ayla wrapped her arms around her neck, raising her eyebrows. My thoughts exactly. Ayla continued to lean forward until they both fell into the ground. Then they hugged each other tightly and shared a long, happy kiss. The end. Voila. We did it. We did it, y'all. Let's see. And story was dramatic as heck. It was dramatic as heck, especially the way I read it. Let's see. Now I have to decide who I want to raid. Lots of friends on today. I know. We'll raid a fellow dragon today. We're going to raid. I don't know if it's Vicerat. I don't know if I should pronounce this. I like in a German manner. I'd be like Vicerat, or if it's Vicerat. But either way, she is playing Slay the Princess, which I thought was like that game interested me a lot. But before I raid her, because I end up like always almost going over the raid time. That was A Kiss of Light and Flame by Mr. Brogath, who's been in chat this whole time, chatting away. You can find the links to buy the books and the complete edition, complete with 28 illustrations, in the links in the pinned comment. The next in the series is called A Kiss of Death and Rebirth, which we'll read probably next week. Mr. Brogath also has a Patreon. And he's also written Detective Trigger series and the Pantech Chronicles. That's a trilogy. So be sure to check Mr. Brogath out. Obviously. Next month, probably in the beginning of February, I'll probably read A Kiss of... Oh god, I already forgot that. I just read it. I think I would know these books. A Kiss of Death and Rebirth. I always want to say that this is a kiss of life and death. But then it sounds like they're giving CPR, so. And then I immediately think of that CPR song. Shouldn't do that to myself. Now it's going to be stuck. Like, just the way she says CPR. CPR is going to be stuck in my head for, like, the rest of the night. Dragon brains, man. Anyway, I'll be back at 4 p.m. on Saturday for... I don't fucking know yet. We're gonna figure it out as we go. It may be Gal Guardians. But we're at least gonna play Honkai Star Rail to see if we can't have any luck. Oh, never mind. I cannot raid her, I guess. Whoops. The raid settings, probably because I only have 2 viewers. Lame. We're gonna pick another dragon then. We're gonna do Northern Kiss then. She's playing Monster Hunter Stories 2 Wings of Ruin. I forgot you could even set minimum raves. Never seen anyone do it. A lot of people do it. Especially if they have, like, a lot of followers, I guess. Because they don't want to be rated by, like, 2 people. Or, like, 1 person. I'll never do that because, I don't, like, I always appreciate raids. No matter how big I get, I think I will always keep raids on. Because that's how you grow your community, and you had to start from somewhere. And small or large people had to raid you, so. You gotta start from somewhere. Anyway, Mr. Brogath, if you would please do a raid message, Yeah, I've seen some very big people happy to get tiny raids. I'm always happy when people raid me. Like, oh, she's also playing with Azure Rose, another VTuber. Neat. But anyway, we're gonna go ahead and raid Northern Kiss. She's a Sakura dragon. She pretty cool. She pretty cool chick. She got some big booba. She shows a little bit more cleavage than I do. I got the scales though. I show off my scales in between my booba. So she's pretty sweet. We're gonna raid her. She's at like 916 followers. A lot of followers. She's got 9 more followers to her goal. Alright. We are going to raid Northern Kiss. Good night, everybody. Have a great Thursday, the rest of your Thursday evening and Friday evening. I'll see you guys on Saturday. Good night, everybody.
Oh.